દિવસમાં એક જ સ્થળ ઉપર 8008 યુનિટ રક્ત એકત્રિત કરીને આપણે લિમ્કા બુક ઓફ રેકોર્ડમાં નામ નોંધાવી શક્યા. 2005માં ડાયમંડ એસોસિએશનની સાથે રહીને આપણે એક જ દિવસમાં એક જ સ્થળે 20,022 યુનિટ રક્ત એકત્રિત કરીને વિશ્વ રેકોર્ડ કરી શક્યા. એવું જ સંસ્થાનો જ્યારે દશાબ્દી મહોત્સવ હતો ત્યારે 7 દિવસ સુધી સતત 156 કલાક સુધી અવિરત રક્તદાન શિબિર રાખીને આપણે આ શિબિર મૂળ રીતે સ્થાપિત કરી શક્યા. મિત્રો, મારો કહેવાનો મતલબ એ નથી કે એટલા રેકોર્ડ કર્યા, પરંતુ જ્યારે અહીંયા ડૉક્ટર ભટ્ટ સાહેબ ને ડૉક્ટર ગોસાઈ સાહેબ આજે નથી ઉપસ્થિત રહી શક્યા, એણે એવું કીધું હતું કે ગરનાળામાંની આ બાજુ જ્યારે પાણી આવે ત્યારે બ્લડની બહુ તકલીફ પડે છે, તો બ્લડ બેંક કરો. ત્યારે મિત્રો અમને મેડિકલની એમની પણ ખબર પડતી નહીં હતી. એમ છતાં આ જ બધા જે સિનિયર ડૉક્ટરો છે એના સાથ અને સહકારથી અમને આ બ્લડ બેંક ચલાવવામાં બહુ હૂંફ અને લાગણી મળી. ત્યારે આપણે આ બ્લડ બેંક ચલાવી શક્યા. એનું પરિણામ એ આવ્યું કે એક સમાજ બ્લડ આપવા માટે જે ગભરાતો હતો, સંકોચાતો હતો, મારું શરીર ફૂલી જાય, મારું શરીર પતલું થઈ જાય, મારું શરીર ધોવાઈ જાય, આવા વિચારોમાંથી બહાર આવીને આજે મોટા પ્રમાણમાં ભાઈઓ તો રક્તદાન કરતા થયા છે, સાથે સાથે મહિલાઓ પણ એટલા જ મોટા પ્રમાણમાં રક્ત આપતી થઈ છે. આપણે ગૌરવ સાથે સુરત કહી શકીએ કે વર્લ્ડમાં વધારેમાં વધારે સ્વૈચ્છિક રક્તદાતા હોય તો એ સુરત શહેરમાં છે. અને આ ગૌરવ આપણે બધાના માટે છે. આ વાત એટલા માટે કરી રહ્યો છું મિત્રો કે એક જ દિવસમાં આપણે 56 યુનિટ, એક જ દિવસમાં એક દર્દી માટે 127 યુનિટ આપણે જો રક્ત આપી શક્યા હોય ને, તો આ જે અવેરનેસ આવી છે ને, ડૉક્ટરોની જાગૃતિ, રક્તદાતાઓની જાગૃતિ, કેમ્પ કરતી સંસ્થાઓની જાગૃતિને આધીન છે. કોરોના કાળમાં જ્યારે બધા જ ઘરમાંથી બહાર આવવા માટે ડરતા હતા, ત્યારે લોક સમર્પણ રક્તદાન કેન્દ્રએ ઘરે જઈને વાન મૂકીને ડોનરોને સોસાયટી એપાર્ટમેન્ટે જઈને ડોનરોને લાવીને રક્ત આપવા માટે, જરૂરિયાતમંદ માટે, થેલેસેમિયાના બાળકો માટે આ પ્રવૃત્તિ સતત ચાલુ રાખી હતી. પ્લાઝમા પણ સેન્ટર આપણે ચાલુ કર્યું. આ બધા વિચારો અમે ધંધાકીય માણસો હોય અમને ન હોય, પણ ડૉક્ટરો અમને કહે કે આવું કરો, અને એને અહીંયા સામે બેઠેલા આ બધા જ જે ડૉક્ટરો છે એ હંમેશા અમને લાગણીને ઊફ આપે છે, અમને માર્ગદર્શન પૂરું પાડે છે. ત્યારે અમે આ કામ કરી શક્યા છે. અમે ટ્રસ્ટીઓ જે પણ વહીવટદાર છીએ એવું અમે માનીએ છીએ કે ભગવાને અમને સેવા કરવાની ઉત્તમ તક આપી છે. એમાં અમે માત્ર આંગળી સિદ્ધ્યાનું કામ કરીએ છીએ, બાકી આ ગૌરવ સુરત શહેરને જાય છે. આપણે થેલેસેમિયાના બાળકોને જેને પણ રોગ હોય અને જેના દવાખાને આ બાળકો આવતા એને ખબર હોય કે એની પરિસ્થિતિ કેવી હોય, એને વાલી આર્થિક અને માનસિક રીતે ભાંગી ગયો હોય, અને આ સતત અમે બ્લડ બેંક ઉપર બેસીને જોતા હતા કે આદરણીય દિલીપભાઈ ઠક્કર જે મિત્રો બોમ્બે રહી છે, એને ગુજરાત સાથે કે સુરત સાથે કાંઈ જ નાતો નથી, તેમ છતાં બહુ જ મોટું અવારનવાર બ્લડ બેંકને દાન આપી અને થેલેસેમિયા સેન્ટર અનિતાબેન દિલીપભાઈ ઠક્કરને નામે ચાલુ કર્યું. આજે અમે ગૌરવ સાથે કહીએ છીએ કે રોજના 15 થી 17 બાળકોને આ વિનામૂલ્યે બ્લડ ટ્રાન્સફ્યુઝન કરી આપીએ છીએ. તો આ આપણને નાની બાબત લાગે, પણ જેને ઘેરે રોગ હોય એને ખબર પડે. હવે તમે વર્ષોથી અમને સાથ અને સહકાર આપતા આવ્યા છો, એવી જ ભાવના અને લાગણી છે કે આવનારા સમયમાં પણ બધા જ આ ડૉક્ટરો અમારી સાથે રહી, જ્યાં પણ અમારી ભૂલ થતી હોય ત્યાં અમારો કાન આંબળીને સારામાં સારી લોકોને અમે સેવા આપી શકીએ એવા અમે આપની પાસે આશા અને અપેક્ષા રાખીએ છીએ. આપ સર્વ અમારા આમંત્રણને માન આપીને પધાર્યા તે બદલ વળીને આપને આવકારું છું, વીણું છું, અને આપ સર્વની નોંધ લેતા ગૌરવ લઉં છું. અહીંયા પધારેલા ડૉક્ટર પ્રદીપભાઈ દેસાઈ સાહેબ, ડૉક્ટર કિરણભાઈ શાહ સાહેબ, વલસાડથી આવેલા આદરણીય ડૉક્ટર ઇટાલિયા સાહેબનું પણ ખાસ નોંધ લઉં છું, કારણ કે આ જ ડૉક્ટરો દ્વારા અને આના જ માર્ગદર્શનથી અમે આગળ વધી રહ્યા છીએ. ફરીને આપ સર્વને આવકારી વિરમું છું. જય હિન્દ, જય ભારત.
થેન્ક યુ વેરી મચ હરિભાઈ. Haribai's emotions were a display for all the hard work that is being done since the last few years. Blood donation itself is a hard job. આજે લોકોને કહું કે તમારા શરીરનો એક ટીપું લોહી આપવાનું છે તો એમ લોકોને કન્વિન્સ કરતાં ખૂબ જ વાર લાગે છે. But sadly for blood, it is not available from the tap water. એટલે I think this is a big and courageous step, and Surat is lucky to have very good blood banks and at the same time very dedicated people. I think a big round of applause for Haribai and the team for the great work they're doing. Now we'll be starting with the scientific sessions. So it's an academic throughput, and I request all the dignitaries to kindly take their seats downstairs. Dr. Rajesh Bhai Sawant, you could stay here. Rajesh Bhai, how does it feel holding the whole stage? You know, લોકો જે મુંબઈથી આવે ને એ લોકો પેલી લોકલ ટ્રેનમાં એકબીજા સાથે ઘસાઈને એવા ટેવાઈ ગયેલા છે એટલે આટલી જગ્યા જોઈને જ એમના ફેસ પર એક આનંદની લહેર છે. પણ હી ઇઝ ઓલરેડી વર્કિંગ એટ કોકિલાબેન એટલે હવે આપણે તો જાણીએ છીએ કે જીઓ એટલે બધું જ મોટું જ કરે. હું એટલે જ સાઇઝ બી વધારીને લાવ્યો કે આમ થોડીક અનુકૂળ લાગે એમને. With this, I'd first like to welcome our chairpersons for this session, Dr. Ghanshyambai V. Patel, Dr. Nikunj Vitlani, and Dr. Jagdish Sakhya. They'll be chairing this session. Before we start off, I'd like Ghanshyambai to felicitate our guest with a small token of appreciation. Now, normally we would give flowers, but now I think we should save trees and save the flowers for Valentine's Day. So, this is a new trend which a lot of us should appreciate, that we are not going to waste flowers in floral welcomes. Now I'd like Dr. Nikunj Vitlani to kindly come over and introduce our speaker.
Good evening all. અત્યારથી ઊંઘી ગયા. I thank Lok Samarpan trustee to give us opportunity to merge this program, and I would like to thank they have given opportunity to introduce me Dr. Rajesh Sawant. Dr. Rajesh Sawant secured his first rank in MD pathological exam in Mumbai University. He was awarded fellowship from the International Society of Blood Transfusion twice in 2005 and 8. He was awarded as a Young Scientific Award by Indian Society of Immunology and Blood Transfusion in 2008. He was also recipient of HD Sauri Awards in 2012 for the contribution in the field of the transfusion medicine. He also secured APHIA Bursary Award from the International Summer School in Histocompatibility and Immunogenetics. He also awarded a J.R. Jolly Award for the outstanding contribution in transfusion medicine. His at present expertise in component therapy, including therapeutic apheresis, quality assurance, accreditation, histocompatibility, and immunogenetics. He is at present attached with Kokilabin Ambani. So I would like to Dr. Rajesh Sawant to give us a enlightenment with his knowledge.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the kind introduction. और सभी को नमस्कार. Very good evening, friends. First of all, I would take this opportunity to congratulate Lok Samarpan Blood Bank Blood Center for finishing their silver jubilee, and this is the 26th anniversary. So really congratulations to all the office bearers, all the staff, all the team of Lok Samarpan Blood Bank. Also gratitude for giving us this opportunity for being here amidst all of you. Gujarat holds a special place in my heart. I have worked for a few years in my career in Gujarat, so it's really nice to come and be amongst all of you and share whatever little bit of experience that we have. So in fact, friends, what I'm going to do in the next few minutes is talk to you about a few important concepts in transfusion therapy. Though the title is Recent Advances, but actually, trust me, these are not at all recent. These principles are almost 2 decades old. But of course, in India, somehow, in the field of transfusion medicine, we are lagging a little behind because blood banks or blood centers are still considered as just a demand and supply department, whereas actually it is a full-fledged discipline today. So let us see how we can progress in terms of evidence-based transfusion medicine. Next slide, please. So this is essentially what I'm going to talk about: the blood supply chain, a little bit about our Indian scenario, evidence-based blood transfusion therapy or blood component therapy, and finally, the bedside blood administration practices. Next, please. So as you all will appreciate that a chain is as strong as its weakest link. And if we look at the entire transfusion chain, which begins with a donor and ends with a recipient, all the various aspects like processing in the blood center, the collection of blood, the labeling of those units, and all the activity that happens in the blood center now is quite standardized, thanks to various initiatives by the government, thanks to accreditation, etc. So what is the weakest link? The weakest link here is once the blood is issued out from the blood center, it goes through various hands which are untrained. It is handled by, say, various healthcare associates, it is handled by nurses, it is handled by junior doctors at the patient's bedside. And that currently is the weakest link today. And therefore, we have to now focus on identifying what are the weakest links and strengthening that weakest link. Next, please. Again, it is evidence-based transfusion practice. What I mean by that is, हमारे सीनियर्स ऐसे करते थे या हमें ये सिखाया गया है. Instead of that, we look at what is the current evidence, because every day, every year, we get new and new understanding of the same subject, of the same principles. So many principles which we have learned as students may not be actually viable today, right? So evidence-based transfusion medicine. Next, please. Now, as I said, the role of blood centers or blood banks has changed from mere providers to partners in transfusion therapy. So if there is an open environment and a good cooperation, good communication between the users of component therapy and the department which is providing those components, then we can have the best patient outcome. And that should be the motto today, which needs to be understood at the level of the entire clinical fraternity. Next, please. And when we are talking about transfusion therapy, two very important things which I feel. One is the blood product safety and also the patient safety. So as far as the product safety is concerned, it deals with the safety of blood transfusion. How safe is our blood today? Are we going to cause more harm than benefit? So it is not only about HIV or HBV, but it is about rational use of blood. Whether the blood, that single unit of blood that we have prescribed, whether it was really necessary. This is what we need to understand. Also patient safety. So a lot of aspects that deal with patient safety would be at the patient's bedside. How the blood is transfused, how the blood is transported, how it is handled, how it is documented, right? A lot of wrong blood in tube, a lot of misidentification and wrong transfusions are happening because of a simple error of labeling of the patient's pilot tube or labeling of the blood unit, etc. So a lot of human element is involved in all these aspects, and that is what we need to understand today. Next, please. So as far as the safety of the recipient is concerned, it is not only proper indications or evidence-based practices, but a good compatibility testing, so doing your tests properly, putting your request for blood transfusion or issue of blood transfusion properly. So a complete request is very, very important. Identification of the hazards, so the way in which we take the informed consent, whether we actually tell the patient or the family about the hazards associated with blood, or we just tell them, ye sign karo, correct? So all those aspects are very, very important as far as the safety of the recipient is concerned. Next, please. So now with this background, let us look at the Indian scenario. How are we doing currently? Are we doing all right? I would say that our scenario looks a little grim even today. And why so? Next. So if you look at the way in which we receive samples, even today, in the era where there are good vacutainers available at a reasonable price, we still get blood in these traditional vacutainers where the stopper is not proper, the blood may be leaking, the label is handwritten, and only the first name of the patient may be visible, isn't it? So these are all the beginning of the large confusion that happens and which leads to a wrong blood transfusion, okay? So these things need to really change. Next, please. Also, if you look at the request, the various forms or the various headings that are there in your request, blood request, are meant to be filled. But generally, we just get the patient's name and whatever is required, 1 unit or 2 unit of red cells or platelets. But even the hemoglobin of the patient may not be mentioned on the request form. So all these things need to be taken into account properly in order to have a safe transfusion practice, not only from the rational use of blood point of view, but from the patient safety point of view also. Next, please. So that brings us to blood component therapy. Now, one very encouraging thing that has happened in India, especially in the last 2 decades, is that component separation has improved. Many blood centers are now separating components. Otherwise, we were struggling to make various consultants understand that whole blood is not lakh dukho ki ek dawa. You know, you have to have components not only to maximize the use of that single precious donation, but also to practice proper evidence-based medicine. So red cells can go to a patient who needs a increment in the hemoglobin, whereas plasma can go to some other patient, maybe who has suffered from burns or who has some factor deficiency. Platelets can be reserved for those who have very low platelet count because of chemotherapy or infectious diseases like dengue, etc. Right? So blood component therapy is nothing new, I think, today. Next, please. But what is important, even when we talk to various hospitals during our accreditation visits, etc., is that there is very poor understanding of 2 things. One is the shelf life and the storage requirements of these components. So all components should not go and sit in the refrigerator. But traditionally, most of us, especially the class 3, class 4 workers, they think that blood matlab ठंडी जगह में रखना चाहिए, refrigerator में रखना चाहिए. So what happens is many a times even platelets get stored at 4 degrees Celsius in a refrigerator, and then that renders them actually useless. Okay, so all these things, these simple things need to be highlighted in some form of training, basically, which needs to be devised for taking care of the practical challenges that are associated with transfusion therapy today. Similarly, even though we have a lot of evidence on alternatives to various blood groups, but even today, even in metro cities, many a times when a particular blood group is not available and the blood center is offering an alternate choice, the consultant says, no, we want the same blood group, we don't want to take any chance because of the fear of medico-legal litigation, right? But if we have our policies, if we have our understanding, if we have good hospital transfusion committee or regional guidelines, then the patient's life can be saved. We've seen so many examples where a patient of postpartum hemorrhage who may be Rh negative, and any well-equipped blood bank will not have more than 4 or 5 Rh negative units in the inventory. That patient actually bleeds to death because the treating obstetrician refused to accept any other transfusion, right? So these simple things need to be understood, and they need to be validated and brought into practice. Next, please. Whole blood. Again, I would like to ask, how many of you really feel that whole blood is still necessary? It is that magical fluid, right? So if you look at even evidence, whole blood was used very, very popularly in the army scenario, in the military combat scenario, where there is no facility for component separation. The only other scenario where whole blood is justified is certain cases where you are doing a neonatal exchange transfusion. In all other scenarios, actually, we have packed red cells, plasma, and platelets, so they can be used in the right proportion. So we can actually do away with whole blood. So now there are many centers who do not keep any unit as whole blood, but separate 100% components. Next, please. Similarly, how many of you feel fresh blood? हमें fresh blood ही चाहिए. I remember when we were residents, we used to actually get demands from the cardiac surgery department that you tell the patient's relatives to come at 6 o'clock to the blood center, and their blood used to be collected, the ELISA used to be run, and the same unit used to be issued actually for the cardiac surgery. Now, that was the understanding 23 years back now. Now, we all know that there's actually nothing like flesh blood. Even the blood that is stored for, say, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, and even till the day 42 of their shelf life, they carry the baseline, characteristics or features. They are maintained, and therefore there is no reason to insist on fresh blood. Next, please. Next. So basically, we have to answer the question: is stored blood bad blood? Okay, is it going to really cause harm? And there is a lot of literature, like the previous slide showed, which has shown that fresh blood is real. You need not really insist on fresh blood, and there are very well-defined clinical scenarios where fresh blood is indicated. What are those? Next slide, please. So here you can see first intrauterine transfusions. As I said, you need leukodepleted blood which is less than 5 days old. So it is not that typical 24 hours fresh blood, right? For babies up to 3 months, also we provide up to 5 to 7 days old blood. For infants up to 1 year of age, 1 week old blood is fine. For patients with chronic liver and renal disease, up to 2 weeks old blood is fine. For open heart surgeries also, now there is a lot of evidence that up to 10 days old blood is fine. And if it is leukocyte depleted, then the shelf life doesn't really matter also, right? For all other anemic patients, even the last day of shelf life is good enough, right? Next, please. So that brings us to the most important component and the most commonly used component, that is the red cells, the packed red cells. So one packed red cell unit will have a hematocrit of approximately 60 to 80%. There will be very little plasma or very little viable platelets, and also very few white blood cells, especially this leukocyte filtered, right? And one unit of this packed red blood cell is going to improve or increase the hemoglobin of the patient by 1 gram%. Next, please. Again here, it is important that we understand the ABO compatibility principles. Okay, so for red cells, O group is the universal donor. Okay, to be precise, O negative can be transfused to almost all blood group patients except the Bombay phenotype and certain other very rare blood groups. We have to understand that, right? But the compatibility principle for plasma and platelet will be exactly reversed. So we'll talk about that a little later. Next, please. Also, in certain scenarios, suppose you have a patient who is Rh negative and bleeding profusely and there is nothing available. If you have the corresponding Rh positive blood, can you transfuse it, or will it be a crime in that case? With a proper consent and a proper dialogue with the treating clinician, you can weigh the risks and benefits, and this blood can actually be life-saving. Next, please. The next important aspect is at what level to transfuse. First, we have talked about what to transfuse. So don't transfuse whole blood, but use packed cells. But now, the greatest and the million-dollar query is at what level to transfuse. There are some scenarios where the anesthetist or the treating physician may say that I want to maintain the hemoglobin at 11 grams or 10 grams. You know, there are some who are fine even at 8 grams. So what is that magic number? Is there any such number possible to define, right? So here, you know, this is just one very old trial actually, a clinical trial, where Herbert, they had done a multi-institutional trial, and they had compared two different strategies. One was a liberal strategy where they maintained the hemoglobin at 10 grams, and one was a restrictive strategy where they maintained the hemoglobin up to 7 grams. So 7 to 10 grams, no transfusion was given. Next, please. So what happened is in the restrictive strategy, there was lower mortality, whereas in the liberal strategy group, there was higher mortality. Next, please. Also, what you need to understand is that each transfusion is associated with a immunosuppression episode, okay? Because there are immunologically viable lymphocytes, immunomodulators, even in the blood that is transfused, especially if it is whole blood, more so if it is fresh blood, right? Next, please. Next. So is there any exception to this policy, restrictive transfusion policy? Yes. If there is a patient who is elderly with myocardial infarction, unstable angina, next please, keep on pressing please. Or, you know, if the hematocrit of the patient is less than 27, previous please, is less than 27, then you need to be a little more liberal, okay? Then don't stick to 7 grams. But for all other patients who are, you know, not above say 60 of age and who do not have any other confounding factor, like cardiovascular system is intact, respiratory system is fine, in them a 7 gram hemoglobin threshold may work fine. So you need not worry really. Next please. Next is about antibody screening. So I am not going to talk in details about this because Dr. Deshpande, who is just going to talk next to me, is going to cover this in details. But I would just want to highlight the fact that we have now reached beyond the ABO and RH blood group, right? So the subgroups and their knowledge, information about the donor group and subgroup, RH typing, is very important. So the best thing to do is, at least for all our hemoglobinopathy patients, all those who are likely to get multiple transfusions, if we can give them RH and KEL matched blood transfusion, then we are going to prevent 70% of the possibility of any antibody formation, right? Next please. Coming to platelets. Again, in the last 2 decades, thanks to, dengue and leptospirosis and malaria, and we are still struggling with these infectious diseases. Cancer was always there, but more hype about platelet transfusions and apheresis platelet transfusions was created in the dengue era, especially in the second half of the 90s, right? So here what we need to understand is what is the content of platelet. So your single donor platelet or apheresis platelet will be equivalent to 5 to 6 random donor platelets, right? But quality wise, are they inferior, the random donor platelets? No. If your patient is going to require only 1 or 2 transfusions, then actually random donor platelets are good enough. We need not insist that we want apheresis platelets only. Next please. The another important aspect is about the choice of platelets. Like when we talked about compatibility requirement, O group was the best choice and suitable for all other patients, right? But can the same be true for platelets or plasma? No, here it is the reverse. AB group would be the choice for all patients. So AB group platelets or AB group plasma can be transfused to any blood group patients, right? Also these days we have platelet additive solution. So actually what happens in platelets or plasma is that the antibodies are present in these platelets or plasma, and they, if they are present in a good number, high titer, then they can cause red cell hemolysis, correct? Therefore, we avoid across group transfusions. But now, since the last 4 or 5 years, we have platelet additive solution. So what we do is we remove the supernatant plasma, about 70%, and add the platelet additive solution. So even if the antibody titer was high, because of the dilution effect of the platelet additive solution, there is actually no risk of hemolysis. So platelets with additive solution can now be used as universal platelets also. Next please. The next important aspect is at what count to transfuse, because we actually face a lot of challenges even in our tertiary care hospitals and referral centers, etc. Because many a times, because of the VIP syndrome, peer pressure, etc., the family of patients are a little worried that platelet count is now 80,000. Doctor, ab kya kar rahe? Platelets क्यों नहीं transfuse कर रहे? And patients actually get transfused at very high platelet count also, and that can in fact be counterproductive. So what are the recommended thresholds? So any count above 1 lakh for transfusion threshold for platelets is needed only in neurosurgery patients, not in any other major surgery at all. If you are dealing with any other major surgery or polytrauma, then your count needs to be at 50,000. If it is above 50,000, you can avoid a platelet transfusion. For minor surgical procedures, 30,000 is good enough. So if you are doing a lumbar puncture or any other minor procedure, 30,000 is good enough a count. For prevention or treatment of bleeding in patients, a count of 20,000, this is in oncology patients, is recommended. And for prophylactic transfusion, mind you, the figure is 10,000, okay? If the patient is not bleeding, not febrile, does not have a huge spleen, and the count is 20,000, you can still wait. Only below 10,000, you need to transfuse platelets, right? Next, please. We've already talked about apheresis versus random donor platelets. So when would you prefer apheresis platelets? Is if you have a patient who is possibly suffering from some leukemia and you want to plan a bone marrow transplant and want to prevent formation of any anti-HLA antibodies, etc., then see to it that you are giving leukodepleted or filtered platelets and platelets from a single donor source, so that the donor exposure, which is a concern, will be taken care of. If that is not the scenario, then your platelets, random donor versus single donor, are going to lead to the same result. Next, please. Fresh frozen plasma. Again, 70% misused. Why? Because many a times fresh frozen plasma is transfused for very, very funny indications. Patient is hypotensive, fresh frozen plasma de do. Patient has low proteins, fresh frozen plasma de do. Are these valid indications? Not at all. You have to transfuse fresh frozen plasma only if the coagulation factors are deranged, okay? Or you want to maintain the INR at 1.5, okay? Otherwise, there are no indications like hypotension or low protein and things like that, isn't it? It shouldn't be transfused like a tonic. Next, please. Again, the blood groups we have already talked. So the principle of platelets, that is AB group FFP, can be transfused to any group patient. Next, please. Cryoprecipitate, very, very specific indications. So it contains fibrinogen and von Willebrand factor. So if you want to transfuse a patient, he should have that specific deficiency of fibrinogen or factor 13, okay? Then cryoprecipitate is indicated. Another challenge that we see is whenever we get a request for cryoprecipitate, we get a request for say 2 or 4 units. Now what is the actual therapeutic dose? The actual therapeutic dose is 1 unit of cryoprecipitate per 5 kg body weight. That means even in a 50 kg patient, we need to actually be transfusing 10 units, which I don't think we ever get, isn't it? So the subtherapeutic transfusion of cryoprecipitate is the current problem. Next, please. Another new component, I may say, which has come up in these days, especially the last 2-3 years, we've seen a sudden resurgence of granulocytes. So because there is very high dose and intensive chemotherapy, lot of bone marrow transplants are happening. So granulocytes have suddenly come into clinical use and they are into the limelight. Okay, I will not go much into the details because it will need a lot of time. But yes, granulocytes are now available. They can be manufactured by apheresis technique from a donor who is given a GCSF injection and a corticosteroid tablet that is for mobilization. Or also if you are using the Buffy coat technique for blood component separation, those Buffy coats can be pooled and they can be given as a granulocyte concentrate product. Next, please. So there are very, very specific indications. Granulocytes are given only if the absolute neutrophil count of the patient is less than 500 per microliter and the patient is refractory to antibiotics or antifungal therapy, right? Next, please. Another important scenario is massive transfusion. When you know that the patient is going to need more than 4 or 5 units of blood within a short span of time, or it is going to be a surgery where you are going to actually exsanguinate or lose a lot of blood, more than 2.5 liters of the patient's blood, etc., then you have to be prepared. And what are the important things to be prepared about? At least collect 2 to 3 plain vacutainers of the patient before he receives the blood. Because once he gets the blood transfusion, it is going to be a mixed picture. You will actually be testing the donor blood, not the patient's native blood, right? So that's the first thing. Second thing is inform the blood center and let them be prepared with platelets, because platelets may not be available just like that without proper communication. Then the dose, as I told you, that FFP has to be given 12 to 15 ml per kg dose. Cryoprecipitate 1 unit per 5 kg, right? Next, please. Also, the target. What will you maintain the platelet count at? In such patients, 50,000 is the target platelet count. The INR is less than 1.5. Fibrinogen has to be greater than 1 gram. And the most important thing, many a times we see that we read about 1:1:1 proportion for massive transfusions. But what we fail to do is achieve hemostasis. The cause of bleeding has to be treated promptly. Otherwise, we keep on transfusing blood and there is still the deadly triad of acidosis and bleeding, etc., and hypothermia, and we may lose the patient. Next, please. Well, as far as WBCs are concerned, again, Deshpande sir is going to talk about it, so I will not go into the details of this. Next slide. Just keep on pressing, please. So there are various side effects of white blood cells, and also they can mediate transfusion-associated graft versus host disease. So I suppose sir is going to cover that, so we can go further. Next, please. Next. Yes, so this is a blood irradiator where you can irradiate, gamma irradiate the blood unit to take care of the T lymphocytes that cause this transfusion associated graft versus host disease. Next please. Yes, so hospital transfusion committee. Again, thanks to accreditation, it is mandatory. But the million-dollar question again here is the transfusion committee only on paper or is it actually interacting? That's the most important thing. So what we need is a proper interaction and working towards a concerted effort towards achieving certain common goals, like defining your transfusion policies, conduct regular evaluation of the usage of blood, etc. Next, please. Then we come to the bedside transfusion practices. Next. So, warming of blood, is it necessary? No. But we see that many a times blood is just wrapped into towels or kept at the window, direct sunlight to warm the blood. That's absolutely not necessary. Many a times the shivering that occurs because of the white blood cells in the blood component is attributed to cold blood, okay, or hypothermia. It is actually not because of the patient feeling cold, but it is because of the white blood cells which liberate the cytokines and they lead to the rigors in the recipient. So such undesirable practices should be stopped. Next. Can you add any medication or drug to a blood bag? Next, please. Yes, is that possible? No, it is actually prohibited. You can only have normal saline going on alongside the blood transfusion. Okay, next, please. So, finally, when you are dealing with transfusions, what we need to do is weigh the risks as well as the benefits. If you look at the current practice, many a times even we as doctors, we think about whether the transfusion is required or not only when we ourselves or our family member or someone known is needing transfusion. Otherwise, generally in the flow, many transfusions are just prescribed that, okay, patient is getting discharged, so chalo, let us push up the platelets so that he doesn't need later on, or let us elevate the hemoglobin, or give some plasma and improve the protein levels. So these are the things which we have to stop from indulging. Next, please. Lastly, I would like to talk about the time limits of transfusion. Again, in the hospital audits, we see that most commonly transfusion happen at night, and that too, they are started at around 11, 12ish, midnight, and they go on throughout and only stop after 5 or 6 hours. Now, these practices can be very dangerous because as it is at night, there is only 1/4 the staff that would be there during the daytime, and the maximum permissible time for a red cell transfusion is 4 hours. It can't go on for more than 4 hours, right? For plasma and for platelets, it is only 20 to 30 minutes. Most of the centers, they give platelets also at a slow rate. So these things need to be actually addressed and they need to be followed properly. Next, please. So finally, safe as well as effective transfusion therapy is very, very important. So make sure that your transfusion is indicated for your patient, accurately identify the patient, accurately identify the sample, give the correct component at the right threshold, at the right time, in the right way. And that is how we are going to have not only a very safe, but a very effective transfusion therapy. Next, please. So, I would end by saying that blood safety and transfusion safety is a major concern of each and every one of us who is present over here. Next, please. And I feel that all of us are a critical part of this quality system of the transfusion system and patient care, and together, next please, with good communication, proper cooperation, and definitely non-confrontation. These are the keys to transfusion therapy and the success of transfusion therapy. These are a few references. Next. Few more. And that's it, friends. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Rajesh bhai. I think one thing we all can agree with is he has this extremely soft demeanor. Like his presentation is so soft that even the blood product won't get shaken up, brittled or hemolyzed while he's giving it to his consultants. A big round of applause again for sir.
Thank you.
Now I request Dr. Jagdish Bhai Sakya to present him with a small gift of appreciation. So you must have received many gifts and mementos. This is something which is utterly different. Dr. Sakya, if you could hold it up so the audience can also see, this is the digital Gita. Digital Gita in the digital age we all are hovering into. એટલે જો suppose વાંચવાનો કંટાળો આવતો હોય, it has a inbuilt pen. You can just hover it અને પછીથી it starts telling you the whole story. So unless you have a wife called Sita or a girlfriend Sita, you can always feel happy keeping the Gita with you. And this is something which is uniquely different, and it's a special memento from the team. Now, the digital Gita has been gifted by Dr. Jivani sir. Now, just one more small request. We have our 3 champions who are onto the stage, and I'd like to call Dr. N.D. Jivani sir to felicitate them. And since all 3 champions have been very punctual, we wish to give them a reminder which also is very punctual. Please see it. Jivani Sahib. And now for Dr. Vikun Vitlani. Yeah, thank you very much. Now after the digital Gita, one more surprise for you. And this is going to be a surprise speech. And I request I wish Haribhai, Maheshbhai, welcome. Opening karta tha tyare tame nahi હતા એટલે double welcome. Dr. Jivrajbhai, Rasikbhai, Jawaharбhai and Jagdishbhai. This is a surprise and a special gift for all of you.
નમસ્તે મિત્રો, અમારા રિસર્ચ સેન્ટરના આદરણીય જોશી સાહેબ કે જે અમારા પિતા તુલ્ય છે, અને એમણે 1 જાન્યુઆરીથી જે પોતાની સેલરી હતી, જે પેકેજ હતું આખા વર્ષનું, એ જતું કરીને હવે એક પણ પૈસો નહીં લઉં એવું કીધું. ત્યારે અમને પણ એમ થયું કે માણસ માત્ર પૈસા પાછળ ગાંડો થઈને દોડતો હોય તો જાતિ ઉંમરે એટલું મોટું બલિદાન આપવું, જતું કરવું, એમાંથી પ્રેરણા લઈને અમે પણ નક્કી કર્યું કે આ રક્ત સિદ્ધિ મહોત્સવ જ્યારે આપણે ઉજવી રહ્યા છીએ ત્યારે પર યુનિટે જે પણ આપણે ચાર્જ લઈએ છીએ તેમાંથી આપણે 200 રૂપિયા હવે સર્વિસ ચાર્જ ઓછો લઈશું, આવું અમે આજે જાહેરાત કરીએ છીએ.
Lovely. A big round of applause, please. Now I'd like to call upon stage somebody who's special to all of us, known since years now. Sanmukhbhai, Dr. Sanmukhbhai Joshi, please stand up, sir. Today, we not only get a chance to honor him, but at the same time, it's a chance to pay him a rich tribute. His achievements are plentiful. So while he comes on, I'd like to call upon stage Dr. Pradeepbhai Desai, a businessman, a doctor, a philanthropist, a man of great repute, Dr. R.Z. Patel, sir, who's come all the way from Baroda. He's a teacher and guide to many. સાહેબ લોકોને ટેકો આપે, એમને ટેકાની જરૂરત નથી. બરાબર ને રમેશભાઈ? Dr. Kiranbhai Shah, sir. Sir, please. And Dr. Yazdibhai Italia, again an eminent person from Valsad. Kiranbhai leads the pack here. Now, what we're going to do with all our guests is they will be sharing a little part of their work experience with us. Sanmukhbhai has worked with almost all of them at different times and in different ways. So I won't take this time much, and I'd request, તમને જે ફાવે તે sir. I'd like to start with Dr. Pradeepbhai Desai.
Dr. Joshi, my it's okay, no problem. ચાલશે. Dr. Joshi, my colleagues from SURAT RAKTADAN Kendra, and the august members of the audience. My association with Dr. Joshi has been fairly long, especially because he was working in this blood group reference laboratory in Bombay, which was subsequently called Institute of Immunohematology, IIH. That was a time when I was having a small private blood bank, not primarily for the purpose of blood transfusion, but because I started a small business activity of manufacturing the blood grouping reagents, as a result of which every antibody or anti-serum, blood grouping anti-serum, had to be exhaustively tested. And then we came across one donor, very unusual, that his serum had some irregular antibody which reacted with many cells with which it should not have reacted. So I tried my best. I was in a small laboratory. I didn't have any institute of immunohematology or something. It was my small private blood bank, and I, being a pathologist, the blood bank part was a minor part. the pathology was my major subject. Anyway, so then I said, this is something unusual. So naturally, my next target or next reference was to the blood group reference center, of which one Dr. Bhatia was the director at that time. So I went there personally with a sample of blood, explained what I found, and they said, okay, leave it here, we'll look into it, check what it is and all that. Incidentally, they found that yes, there is something funny. Not funny, but something unusual. With the result that they found one antigen, one antibody actually, and that was reacting with the antigen in large number of Indian population. It was not hitherto described. So naturally, one goes to Kashi in our Hindu philosophy, goes to Makkah in Muslim Islam. So our final word of appeal was in the blood group reference center in London. So the sample were sent to London, and they also agreed that no, this is something that hitherto has not been described. Thereafter, it was investigated in great detail, and naturally, I being primarily a pathologist, secondarily a blood banking person, had no expertise first of all, and then secondly no infrastructure to deal with such complicated problems. So Dr. Joshi, being at the IIH at that time BGRC, had been involved in testing this. To cut the matter short, ultimately it resulted into the identification of a brand new blood group which was hitherto not described anywhere in the world. And because it was first detected in the Indian population, Dr. Bhatia and his team, which included Dr. Joshi, decided to name it as Indian blood group, IN. Just like A, B, O, etc. This is one more blood group, IN. And this has been reported for the first time in the world literature. And that was obviously, I should not say, but naturally a very close scientific collaboration. Although I am not an immunohematologist, I am a very simple, small pathologist, but naturally it has been an honor and a pleasure to have been associated with such very talented team of people consisting of immunohematological experts. And that since then, our association has been very cordial, very fruitful, and we had done quite a few things together thereafter, which I don't want to enumerate here, but I just want to say that it has been a great pleasure for me, honor for me to have been associated with a person of the scientific inclination and scientific depth of a person like Dr. S.R. Joshi. So that is what I would like to say at this point of time, and I wish him still more. He is already identifying new blood groups. He has already identified few more by now, and I wish he can identify something new, more. So with that, I wish him all the well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. History and trivia always has its charm. Actually, તો આનું નામ સુરતી બ્લડ ગ્રુપ જ હોવું જોઈએ, પણ હવે ભારત મહાન, તો let it be India blood group, because it started from Surat Man from Surat. Mrs. Bhatia will get her also to Surat. So બધું સુરતી જ. Anyways, now I request Dr. R.Z. Patel, sir.
થોડી દુનિયા ડગમગાતી લાગે છે. હું મારી માતૃભાષામાં બોલવા પ્રયત્ન કરીશ. હવે અહીંથી મને ખબર નથી પડતી, સંભળાય છે તમને લોકોને પાછળ? અચ્છા. મારું નામ રમેશ પટેલ. હું પણ સૌરાષ્ટ્રમાંથી આવું છું અને વડોદરામાં ભણ્યો. પછી નોકરી શોધતો હતો, કોઈ આપતું નહોતું, પણ બ્લડ બેંકમાં કોઈ જવા તૈયાર નહીં, કારણ કે એ છે ને બળતું ઘર છે, બધા જોડે ઝઘડા કરવાના, એટલે મને કોઈ રાખે નહીં ને ત્યાં કોઈ રહે નહીં, એટલે હું એમાં રહી ગયો. પછી બ્લડ ગ્રુપ વિશે જેમ વાંચીએ ને એમાં આપણને થાય કે કંઈક જાણવું જોઈએ. આમાં કંઈ આપણે હિન્દુઓમાં તીર્થ સ્થળે જવાનું મહાત્મ્ય છે. મારે ઇમ્યુનોહિમેટોલોજીનું તીર્થસ્થળ મુંબઈમાં હતું. ત્યાં એક મહર્ષિ હતા, લેટ ડૉક્ટર એચ.એમ. ભાટિયા. ત્યારે બ્લડ ગ્રુપ રેફરન્સ સેન્ટર તરીકે ઓળખાતી સંસ્થામાં જવાનું અમને બધાને સ્વપ્ન રહેતું કે આ વખતે લેશે કે નહીં. મને 6 અઠવાડિયાની ટ્રેનિંગ હતી. હું 1980માં ગયેલો. ત્યારે સનમુખભાઈએ સૌથી પહેલાં મને બીઓ બ્લડ ગ્રુપ શીખવાડ્યું. નહોતું આવડતું એમ નહીં, પણ એને સાયન્ટિફિક રીતે શું શું મહત્ત્વ છે એ બધું શીખવાડ્યું. હવે આ જ ઋષિ જોડે રહીને કામ કરતા ઘણા વિદ્યાર્થીઓને મેં જોયા, એમના એ વખતના વિદ્યાર્થીઓને, જેને દરેકને હું ઋષિ કહીશ. એમાંના એકને તમે ઓળખતા હશો, સુરત બ્લડ બેંકમાં રહી ગયેલા ડૉક્ટર સ્નેહલતા ગુપ્તે. એણે નિયોનેટલ જોન્ડિસ પર ઘણું કામ કરેલું. એક ત્રીજા છે, તમે નહીં ઓળખતા હોય, ડૉક્ટર આયર, પ્લીઝ સ્ટેન્ડ અપ. એ પણ ત્યાં હતા અને ઇમ્યુનોગ્લોબ્યુલિન અને કુમ્સ ટેસ્ટ પર અને સિરોલોજીકલ ટેસ્ટ પર એને ઘણું કામ કર્યું. આ બધા જ મહાનુભાવોની એક તકલીફ હતી, બહુ જ ઓછું બોલે, પોતાની પ્રશંસા ક્યારેય ન કરે. અને વર્ષો પછી મને ફોન આવ્યો સન્મુખભાઈનો કે અમે અહીંયા કતારગામમાં એક બ્લડનો કેમ્પ કરીએ છીએ વાટલિયા પ્રજાપતિમાં. એમાં G6PD ડેફિશિયન્સી બહુ છે એવું એ લોકો કહે છે, ડૉક્ટરો નથી કહેતા, પ્રજાને ખબર હતી. અને એક કંઈ પણ ઓક્સિડાઇઝિંગ ડ્રગ આપે એટલે લાલ પેશાબ થાય. તો આજે અમારો કેમ્પ છે, તમે કંઈ ટેસ્ટ કરી શકો? હવે મારી આગળ આઉટ ઓફ બ્લુ તો કંઈ મળે નહીં. એક દિવસ તો ડિપાર્ટમેન્ટમાં શોધવું પડે બધું, એટલે બીજે દિવસે બનાવી રિએજન્ટ અને હું ટ્રેનમાં બેસી ગયો. અને સુરત બ્લડ બેંકમાં ત્યારે તેઓ કામ કરતા હતા. રાત્રે અમે સુરત બ્લડ બેંકમાં બેસીને ટેસ્ટ ટ્યુબો રાખીને ટેસ્ટ શરૂ કર્યા. G6PDમાં મેલ અને ફિમેલ જુદા કરવા પડે, કારણ કે એક સ્ક્રીન છે. મેલના શરૂ કર્યા ત્યારે અમને બંનેને ચક્કર આવવા માંડ્યા. લગભગ 28% મેલ G6PD ડેફિશિયન્ટ હતા અને આગળ તપાસ કરતાં એ મેડિટેરિયન ટાઈપનું સિવિયર ડિઝીઝ છે, જેની એક્ટિવિટી નોર્મલ કરતાં 10%થી નીચે છે. અને આ રીતે ગણીએ તો સ્ત્રીઓ છે વાટલિયા પ્રજાપતિની, એની 8% સ્ત્રીઓ પણ હોમોઝાયગોટ, એટલે લગભગ મેલ જેવું આવે એનામાં. અને આ કોમ્યુનિટીમાં બાળકોને નિયોનેટલ જોન્ડિસ થવાની ઘણી શક્યતાઓ હોય છે. એટલે પછી વાટલિયા પ્રજાપતિમાં ત્યારે એમ કહેતા હતા મને ઘણા વર્ષો પહેલાં કે 50,000નું ગ્રુપ છે કતારગામમાં, વેડ રોડ પર અને આમરોલીમાં. અત્યારે તો ઘણું વધારે હશે. પછી ઘણા કેમ્પ અમે એમાં કર્યા વચ્ચે વચ્ચે આવીને રવિવારે. અને જ્યારે લોકસમર્પણ બ્લડ બેંકમાં ડાયરેક્ટરની જરૂર હતી ત્યારે અમારા વિદ્યાર્થી ભાઈ ધાનાણી, એ પણ બહુ ઓછું બોલે છે અને કે એક એમ કહેશે કે મારા વિદ્યાર્થી હતા પણ હું એની આગળથી ઘણું શીખ્યો છું. એણે મને કહ્યું કે તમે આવો. એટલે મેં એને કહ્યું કે હું આ કામ માટે યોગ્ય નથી. યોગ્ય માણસ છે અત્યારે દેશની બહાર છે. હવે આપણે એને કંઈક ઝાડ નાખીને પાછા પકડવા પડે. એક જમાનામાં સુરતમાં જ હતા. એટલે અમને પ્રયત્ન કર્યો ડૉક્ટર જોશીને સાથે કોન્ટેક કરવાનો. ત્યારે એમણે કહ્યું કે મારે મલેશિયાની એક ઇન્સ્ટિટ્યૂટમાં 3 વર્ષનો કોન્ટ્રાક્ટ છે, એટલે એ પહેલાં હું નહીં આવી શકું. એટલે અમે એને કે મારું હવે સ્વાસ્થ્ય સારું નથી, એમને હૃદયનું ઓપરેશન કરવું પડેલું, કોરોનરી હતું. એટલે અમે એને કહ્યું કે જો તમે બોમ્બેમાં કોરોનરી સાથે જીવતા રહી શકતા તો અમે પણ તમારી સારવાર સારી રીતે કરી શકશું. પણ સુરતના આ ડાયમંડને અમે ફરીથી પાછો અહીંયા લાવવા માગીએ છીએ અને એમને કોઈ પણ રીતે કરી અને ખેંચવામાં મારો પણ એક ભાગ હતો. અને એ પછી એક લોકસમર્પણ બ્લડ બેંકમાં ઉપર એક માળ આખો બંધાયો રિસર્ચ ડિવિઝન તરીકે. અને અમારું એવું વિઝન હતું કે આપણું સોસાયટી છે એના જુદા જુદા વર્ગોમાં જે લોહીના વારસાગત આવા રોગો છે, સિકલ સેલ એનિમિયા ટ્રાઇબલની અંદર બહુ છે અને તમારી સુરતમાં મજૂરી માટે સિકલ સેલ એનિમિયા પણ બહુ આવે છે. તો આ બધા માટે આપણે કંઈક કરવું જોઈએ. અમે બધા ટેસ્ટ એસ્ટાબ્લિશ કર્યા, પણ દુર્ભાગ્યે અમે કોઈ એમની સાથે કામ કરી શકે એવો યોગ્ય માણસ મળ્યો નહીં, એટલે અમે આગળ કરી શક્યા નહીં. આનાથી વધારે મારે કંઈ કહેવાની જરૂર નથી. સખત કામ કરે છે, ઉપરને નીચે રહેવાનું એટલા માટે જ રાખ્યું છે અને ગમે ત્યારે એના હાથમાં એક 500 પીપેટ હશે, એમાંથી ટીપા પાડતા હશે. અને અહીં આવ્યા પછી એમણે જે કંઈ શોધો કરી નવી, એમાંની ઘણી ઇપોક મેકિંગ છે, ઘણી બધી ક્રાંતિકારી શોધો કરી છે બ્લડ ગ્રુપમાં, જે તમને એના મોઢેથી સાંભળવા નહીં મળે, પણ તમે તપાસ કરશો તો તમને ખ્યાલ આવશે. આભાર.
થેન્ક યુ વેરી મચ સર. હવે જ્યારે આવું બધું સાંભળું ને કે ખૂબ જ ઓછું બોલે એટલે મહાન છે ને, ત્યારે મને થાય કે હવે હું ચૂપ જ થઈ જાઉં. એટલે અને આ મારી બાજુમાં એક બી શબ્દ બોલ્યો નથી, એટલે આમાં નાયક થઈ જાય ને હું ખલનાયક થઈ જાઉં છું. પણ આપણે તો સર આવું જ છે, ચૂપ રહે તો કદાચ એટેક બેટેક આવી જાય, એટલે એ બહુ ફાવતું બી નથી. હવે નાવ આર લાઈક Dr. Kiranbhai Shah, an eminent hematologist, to share his experience with sir.
Good evening, friends. I started my practice in 1981 as a first hematologist in Surat. And I was associated with Surat RAKTADAN Kendra almost from 1983-84 onwards. And we had occasion to work with Dr. Joshi for almost 5 years in Surat RAKTADAN Kendra, and it was a wonderful time. I recollect one case. Dr. Rajesh Sawant has told us about judicious use of blood transfusion. When Dr. Joshi was director at that time, there was one patient whose hysterectomy was done, and patient was asked 2 units of blood. Patient did very well, surgery was wonderful, patient required 1 transfusion during surgery, and then patient was to be discharged. The relatives reminded the doctor કે સાહેબ 2 બોટલ બ્લડ મંગાવીને એક જ વાપરી, બીજી બોટલ કેમ નહીં વાપરી? So the doctor, gynecologist told the sister, give that blood. Immediately after the transfusion, patient had a severe reaction and disseminated intravascular coagulation. I was very new to the city. I was called to see the patient. Patient was bleeding. And when we checked it, it was a totally hemolyzed blood. And the blood was stored in a freezer compartment of the refrigerator. So it was a totally hemolyzed blood. So unnecessarily blood transfusion should not be given. At that time, I was so touched by these incidents that I printed a medical warning on my prescription letter. Medical warning: transfusion of blood products may be injurious to health transfuse only when it is must. 3 years back, there was one article in ASH meeting and in hematology book, medicine without blood. And there are so many diseases where we can avoid blood transfusion. And there are some communities, they don't take blood transfusions, and they are also how they are managed. It was discussed. And I think if the blood product is life-saving, I agree, but it should be used judiciously, and when it is not indicated, it can be easily avoided. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Now I'd like Dr. Yazdibai Italia.
Good evening, everybody. Dr. Sanmukh Joshi is Dr. H.M. Bhatia's gift to the nation. Dr. Bhatia has been successful in producing few genuine basic scientists, particularly immunohematologists in India at BGR. Out of them, Dr. Sanmukh Joshi turned out to be a genius, and really he deserves all appreciations from us. He's a good scientist. A scientist should be curious, and Sanmukh is curious about his world, and his world is small test tubes and his antiserals. You can see him playing all the time with these small test tubes and the bunch of antiserals, which probably may be in hundreds or thousands in numbers in his refrigerator. You can see all these characteristics of a scientist in Dr. Sanmukh Joshi. Scientists are heroes, or at least they are engaged in heroic activities, and they are on a thrilling journey towards knowledge, even though the rest of society may not always be aware of all the ups and downs of their quest. I must congratulate management of Lok Samarpan કે જેને આ હીરાને પારખીને એમને ત્યાં રાખ્યો છે. Sanmukh will not settle for average. He will definitely look for something new. It is said that there is nothing impossible for them who will try. Dr. Sanmukh Joshi is one of them. Just send one mismatched blood sample to Dr. Sanmukh, and within next few hours, he will bombard you with number of questions along with the solution for that. So that is very important. Science is organized knowledge. What makes a true scientist? A scientist is someone who systematically gathers and uses research and evidence to make hypotheses and test them, to gain and share understanding and knowledge. And he has shared his experience through number of publications in national and international journals, which is highly good thing for a scientist. Imagination is better than having a knowledge. Knowledge is limited. Imagination encircles the world. Imagination is the key to innovation. And Dr. Joshi's imagination is an example for all of us. I wish him good health and happiness. ખુદા એમને સદબુદ્ધિ આપે, સારા વિચારો આપે અને સારા કામ કરવાની શક્તિ આપે. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Now, I'd like to call upon Bhavna Ben, his better half. She is Sanmukhbai's support system, and like we say, like behind every successful man is the hand of a woman. And here is the lady who has not only supported him, but she stood by all his timings, his tantrums, his unavailability. Now I'd like Haribhai, Maheshbhai, Dr. Jivrajbhai, to present her with a small token of appreciation and a memory which will last forever. Dr. Subhashbhai Kheni, Dr. Ashish Kanani. Subhashbhai, chalo. Sanjay, Shamjibhai, Manisha Ben and Vijay. Hiren. પાછળવાળાને પાછા જમાડો, તાલીઓ નથી વાગતી. ઓકે. આમનું Done? A man of few words will also go and chalo photo jabi gya. Now I request Sanmukhbhai sir, એમના બે શબ્દ સાંભળીએ. Please sir, share your journey. ભાવનાબેન આપ બેસો ને. Please.
I have been in Surat in two different innings. First one was from 1992 to 1998, some 6 years. And next inning is current one since 2015 till date and still further. I am not retiring. I am still continue to be working with Lok Sabha program till God keeps me healthy and spiritually alive. I have worked in Surat for almost 14 years, and first 6 years I was with Surat RAKTADAN Kendra, where Dr. P.K. Desai, who is here as chairman, he literally dragged me from Sanjay Gandhi PGI Lucknow to Surat, that they wanted me to be working with Surat RAKTADAN Kendra. Then I am thankful to him so that he introduced me to Surat. The next in line was Dr. R.Z. Patel, Dr. Hirenbhai Danani, and the trustee mandal of Lok SAMARPAN RAKTADAN Kendra. They invited me to work with Surat. I have a special kind of Lena Devi with Surat, where Dr. Desai told everyone that I was an instrumental in discovering INA blood groups in my scientific tender age of my life. Then on, I worked at many places, and Then again I have an opportunity to work with in Surat, with people of Surat, and I could identify a new blood group called INRA, and then a new blood group system called EMM. I have I served as research officer to begin with ICMR in Mumbai. Then I was working in Libya, then Lucknow, way back in India, then Surat, and then in Mumbai, in Bombay Red Cross, then Ministry of Health in Muscat, Oman, and then served as associate professor in Penang, Malaysia. Most of the places I was working as a teaching faculty in the field of blood transfusion. Actually, I had a few, in a span of 50 years of my scientific career, I had an opportunity to do several discoveries in our soil, which includes Indian blood group, as I told you, then I negative, small I negative of the I blood groups, then very rare antigen MG. India was the third country at that time to discover this antigen in India. Then Colton null phenotype in Bombay Red Cross when I was working. Then I have discovered a new NTH reagent, NTH lectin, in the fruit called Cantola. Cantola seeds has unique property of reactivity against the ordinary O group red cells, which fails to react with Bombay phenotype, Bombay blood group. Then more recently, after joining SAMARPAN, I got one INRA. It was recognized as iron 5 blood groups of the Indian system. Then EMM negative, as I told you. And I presented some of these works at scientific meetings and published over 90 papers in the field of blood transfusion and contributed chapters in some monograms. More recently, I have come across to one new blood group in ABO blood group system, which is still working in collaboration with Australian Red Cross. I got some awards and prizes and recognition. J.C. Patel Prize for Best Paper, Dr. Sanghvi Award for Best Paper, and ISBTI Best Paper in Transcon 2016 when I discovered INRA. Manorama Sapre Award of Indian Society of Hematology and Transfusion at Chennai in 1998, then Transmedicon Lifetime Achievement Award in 2016 at Bhopal, then Transcon 2020 ISBTI Lifetime Achievement Oration Award at Chennai, and then also I had an opportunity to have a Marquis Who's Who USA biography inclusion in 20th edition 2003 and 2004. I have some interesting statistic to present here today. That there is a study in USA revealed that the most productive age in human life is between 60 to 70 years of age. The second most productive stage is from 70 to 80 years of age. And the third most productive age is from 50 to 60 years of age. The average precedence of prominent companies in the world is the 63 years. This statistic tells us that the best years of life are between 60 to 80 years. Irony of destiny is that in Indian scenario is that a person retires at the age of 60 plus minus 3 in government sectors. And that is a pitiable situation that when we are having a more productive age, then government tells us that now you are retired. Now, with all these statistics, I became introspective And I divided my 50 years of scientific career, spanning from 71 to 80 years, first decade. I had publication 16, 81 to 1990, 9, 91 to 2013, and 2001 to 2010, 11, and 2011 till date, it was more than 36. Now, actually, this case again confirms what I said earlier, that you have more productive age when you are. And lastly, there is one inspiration example. It is good enough. Good enough in the sense, 100 years completed by Professor John B. Goodenough. He was a Nobel laureate in 2019, worked on lithium-ion battery that we are using in our mobile, etc., at the age of 97. And then he professed that learning from womb to tomb. So learning is never completed until one dies. Asked if he still works in lab. He was asked that whether you are still working in lab. His pet reply was that if one retires, it does not mean he should wait for dying. So this is what an inspiration that Dr. Goodenough has given to many of us, including me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. The man of few words tells us words of wisdom. Apno chance haju apna time aayega. Like he showed, we still have another 20, 30 years before we start something productive. એટલે આપણે જરા cool થઈને જ રહેવો. He started at 80, 90, 100 ને આપણે તો પેલું જીન આવી જ જવાની છે. એટલે આપણે તો 150, 200 સુધી છે જ અહીંયા. એટલે stay cool, enjoy. Now, thank you, sir. That was excellent. Now I'd like to request I'd like to call upon Anubhag Bhai Savani. Dr. Savani, please. And we see him in his new look. So I'm saying this from the stage so that I see him back in his old look. And I request him to felicitate all our chairpersons. Dr. Pradeep Bhai Desai, Dr. R.Z. Patel sir, Dr. Kiran Bhai Shah sir, and Dr. Ashish. Dr. R.Z. Patel, sir.
Now, who can dare to say this man is old and old man? He looks like a hero.
Dr. Kiran Bhai Shah, sir. Kiran Bhai. And Dr. Yazdi Italia, sir. Thank you very much. I'd request all the dignitaries. Thank you, Dr. Savani. Now we have one more very interesting session left. Dr. Anand Deshpande shall be sharing his views. But first, I'd like to call upon Dr. Ashaben Bhatt, Dr. Hasmukh Sujitra, and Dr. Prafulbhai Chasatia to kindly come over and stage as chairpersons. Friends, this is the last session, and I request your time. કારણ કે હમણાં ઘણા અધીરા થઈને હાલવા માંડ્યા છે. But like Sir said, patience is the key, and we still have, many of you at the back have more than 50 years, and many in the front have more than another 30, 40 years. I'd like to call upon Dr. Anand Deshpande, sir. He has been patiently waiting on the lines. Okay. I'd like Dr. Hasmukh Sujitra, a small welcome token. You want water, sir? Acha, call. એ તું આપી આવ એમની પાસે છે જ કદાચ. હા. Now I'd request a brief introduction for this very nice personality, and I request Ashaben to kindly come forward.
Good evening, friends. On behalf of Lok Samarpan Kendra, I welcome Dr. Anand Deshpande, who is a consultant hematopathologist and in charge of transfusion medicine at PD Hinduja National Hospital, Mumbai. He is the head at the NAT laboratory and HLA laboratory in Western India. He has been trained in the peripheral blood stem cell transplant at Minneapolis, USA, and has taken advanced training in transfusion medicine at the Wells Blood Services, Cardiff, UK. I am really delighted to know that Sir has a special interest in TRX, that is therapeutically rational exchange of disease RBC, and TPE, therapeutic plasma exchange. Why I am interested? First, because the acronyms reminds me of a Tyrannosaurus Rex dinosaur who is favorite of my grandson, and the most relevant Surtis cannot forget the havoc of the falciparum malaria in the year 90s. This TRX, if available at that time, could have saved several of the life of our patients. He is the recipient of the prestigious Dr. H.M. Bhatia Oration 2019 and BGR Oration in 2007. He has carried out some of the first TPE procedure and tracks using cell separators. Nowadays, many of our patients with thrombocytopenic purpura or hemolytic uremic syndrome and similar few ailments do receive therapeutic exchange of plasma, and they survive. Now, welcome him with a round of applause. Thank you, sir. Now the stage is yours.
Thank you.
Thank you, madam. Thank you, sirs. I will like not to be like dinosaur, like personality, so I will keep it very simple. Uh, Let me congratulate, of course, Lok Samarpan Raktadan Kendra for their fabulous work for last 26 years, and I wish them many such plenty of years to serve this, not only Surat city, but the country. Because I know they are one of the best blood centers in India, and they have been recognized so. And thanks for inviting me here for this grand event, grand evening, and special thanks to, of course, dear Dr. Sanmukh, who called me so many times. Thank you, sir. Of course, my association with him has been very long time. And I have two special things to say before I start interacting on scientific matters. First was when he says the young and budding. So I was highly impressed because I crossed 60 some time back. And I take it as a compliment that I'm still looking young. Thank you very much. And second was I was highly impressed, I must say, by digital Gita. Because I strongly believe in Gita. And yes, I started not reading but understanding Gita because people used to say that there is an answer for every question in Gita, right? So I took it up as a challenge. Is there answer? And yes, there is. So that's something great you people have done here to giving them. So coming to the topic, I know it's at the fag end of the day. To give a last lecture is always a challenge. I will rush through some of the slides, but I will take up the points where clinically it is very important. Mind you, it may take some time, some extra time, but it's okay. Next, please. As you all know, I don't need to define, transfusion reactions are any adverse event associated with the transfusion, okay? They may range in severity. We take them very lightly. They may be clinically very easy to handle or very difficult, right? They may be immunologic, non-immunologic. Next, please. We have really come long way from as using the cross-matching on the site to now we're showing everyone cross-match antibody negative RHKL phenotype match, leukodepleted, NAT tested, and now very soon pathogen inactivated blood. That's a big journey where Dr. Saab also was referring to. Now we have come a long way. We are doing that. But still, there are transfusion reactions. An estimate says at least 240 to 280 adverse reactions occur every 100,000 blood compound. It's a big number. Next, please. This is the data from USA, where they say 7.3% reactions are still serious, right? And TRALI and TACO, which transfusion-associated acute lung injury, I'll talk about it in little detail, and transfusion-associated overloads. These are very important. Next, please. Next, please. This is the classification which everybody knows. So some of these reactions I will quickly go through in next 15 minutes only, and we'll try to cover up. Next, please. Febrile reactions, as you know, are very common. They mostly occur with the platelet transfusion. Why? Because at least in my center, I know Rajesh center, we give 100% leukodepleted blood. All the blood units that glow out of our centers are inline filtered bags are used. So there is no chance of leukodepletion, no chance of a reaction if you use those bags, right? So all PRBs which are going out are leukodepleted. So febrile reaction, but that doesn't mean that for febrile reaction not to occur, you can give a prophylactic antipyretic or anti-allergic thing. That should not be done, right? So don't give a prophylactic injection. Why? People will ask me, because anyway they will prevent febrile reaction. They may mask a serious hemolytic reaction. Because the first sign of hemolysis will be a rise in temperature, which you may miss. So if you are giving an antipyretic right at the beginning of a transfusion, you may mask a serious hemolytic transfusion reaction. So please don't do that. Next, please. Next, please. Next, please. So a word about leukodepletion. These reactions are prevented by leukodepletion. Rajesh referred to that earlier, but there are not many PGs or postgraduate. I always ask them, how did leukodepletion come into practice? Everybody answers it is to prevent febrile reaction or to prevent this and prevent that, but no. If you really read the literature, they come into picture because UK, there was a epidemic of bovine BSC, as we call it, bovine spongiform encephalopathy in the cattle. UK beef eating is very high, and they realized that some of the patients showed the signs of Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease. Now, many of us read it only in the final MBBS, and it doesn't, you may not see any patient in the practice. Isn't it CJD, Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease? But they noticed such features in the people in UK, and some of the patients, when they died, they did the autopsy, and they realized that there was a prion protein, which is a classical sign of CJD, but the prion protein which they detected in this patient was different than the classical CJD, right? So that's why the disease was called variant CJD. And they realized that virus was transmitted along with the white cells, leukocytes, to the recipient. Okay? So it was all traced back retrospectively, and it was realized, it was proved that the variant CJD is the cause. In UK, there was a sort of a knee-jerk reaction. So all the units which go out of UK blood bank are leukodepleted, right? To prevent variant CJD, okay? These all other advantages are, I will say, associated advantages. They prevent febrile reaction, they are useful in acute lung injury and everything. Other things came up later on, but it started with that, okay? But leukodepletion means 4-log reduction with filter. Normally, when you transfuse any blood component, there are 10⁹ leukocytes with every component. And when you use a filter, it comes down to 10⁵ or less than 10⁶. And that is the ideal value for leukodepletion. Okay? And that can be achieved only by using filter. My sincere request to all users, please use leukodepleted blood. Okay? It's all very beneficial to the patient. Next, please. Thoda next, jaldi karo. So, next, please. Next. I already covered everything. I'm not go. Next. So these are the standards. As I already said, 4-log reduction should be there, which is ultimately you can get it only by filters, leukodepletion filters if you use. Next, please. But not the filters which you are using. You use the routine filters to transfer to the blood. That's not going to achieve any leukodepletion. Next, please. So these are the evidence-based, as Rajesh said, to reduce aluminization, viruses transmission, and febrile reaction. But they came later on. Leukodepletion was not brought into practice for this purpose first. Next, please. Allergic, as you all know, you can easily control them. They are the sort of easily manageable transfusion reactions. They are IgE-mediated hypersensitivity reaction, mind you. Next, please. IgA deficient, yes, you may come across in your practice with the patient of IgA deficient, and then there is a severe reaction. Next, please. With that, I move into the next, which is a clinically important acute lung injury. Next, please. Now, I will again go through fast. Acute lung injury in India, we don't see as much as we see abroad, okay? If you see the literature, as I showed you before also, I've made a passing reference, it is one of the most serious reactions that occur in the recipients, right? It is the most serious reaction which can prove fatal, okay? So it has been looked into, if you see the literature, you will see plenty of literature on TRALI, as we call it, or the acute lung injury, right? And why does it occur? There are many theories. I will go through that quickly. Initially, they used to say that TRALI occurs because there are antibodies in the donor, anti-neutrophilic or anti-HLA antibodies. When you transfuse the blood to the recipient, these antibodies are transferred to the recipient. They attack the neutrophils, particularly in the lung vasculature. They form the complex, and that causes acute lung injury. Okay, that was the theory which was postulated, which went on for many years. But then people realized that there were no antibodies in the donor in many of the cases, right? So then how did this occur? So the latest postulate is that the neutrophils in the lung vasculature are already primed, okay, and they are activated because of one could be severe infection in the patient or a post-major surgery patient. These are patients who have got already primed neutrophils because of the cytokines which are released during the surgery, right? And then there is a complex between the already primed neutrophils and the antibodies, or if there are no HLA or HNA antibodies, then even the biologically active lipids which are present in the donor blood may cause this problem. So it is called a sort of a two-hit therapy. One is neutrophils are already primed and you are adding the antibody or bioactive lipid, biologically active lipids from the donor to the recipient, which cause the problem. So that is the cause of TRALI. All the products are implicated. Where TRALI may be caused by PRBC, FFP, RDP, platelets. It can be caused by any of them. So now though you will ask me why we don't see, I'm sure you don't see that many reactions in your clinical practice also. Reason is that too a little simple, because if you look across the donor spectrum in India, at least I can talk of my center, we have hardly 10% donors who are females. Okay? So they qualify as donors. So there are hardly out of say 100 donors, 90 are males, 10 are female even today. Right? They are differed for various reasons. So which is the female donor which is likely to have many, many antibodies? Okay? Because that's the rule of immunohematology. They are likely to have not only anti-red cell antibody, but anti-neutrophilic or anti-HL antibodies also, because of the pregnancy and this thing. Right? So we don't have that many female donors. Then most of the good transfusion centers, like we, and in many centers in Bombay, we don't use female plasma for therapeutic purpose. Okay? We use it for fractionation purpose. Like albumin and those products which Rajesh referred to, those are prepared from that plasma. We don't use it therapeutically for transfusion to a patient, right? So those are set. And in the hospital setup, the staff is well trained to detect an acute lung injury quickly. Okay, that should be the thing. And there are, next please, there are good criteria which I won't go into it, all of you know it in the literature, that these are the standard criteria to diagnose TRALI. These are the Canadian group criteria which are followed all over the world. Okay, how the acute lung injury occurs and how to take care of it. Next please. So that's the pathophysiology which I already talked to you. The single antibody hypothesis and double hit. Next please. Okay, that is the two-hit hypothesis which I said. Next please. And this is how TRALI, why it doesn't occur, which I already referred to. Next please. I'm sorry I have to go a little fast, but you may ask me questions later on. TACO, why I brought this slide, because TACO is not very easily understood by us and not very easily recognized. TACO has a very good marker which is called BNP, B-type natriuretic peptide, which is a classical marker for TACO, that is the circulatory overload, which occurs immediately after circulation. Next please. Next. I must skip. Next. Now PTP again, you may have seen in your practice. What happens, you give platelet to the patient and the platelet count drops drastically. That is called a post-transfusion purpura. Now again there are therapy, why it should occur? Because you are giving platelets to the patient. Patient may produce antibodies against those platelets and destroy those platelets, right? So then the platelets which are only transfused should get destroyed. What happens in PTP? Even the patient's own platelets are destroyed. So that is the very, what you can say, confusing thing for diagnosing a PTP. But that is the landmark of PTP or diagnostic criteria, that not only platelet count drops, it destroys the transfused platelet, but his own platelets also. Again, there are many reasons. Classically, they say it could be because of the anti-HLA platelets. These platelets, which the patient produces, reacts with the platelets which are transfused, destroy them. Sometimes they form complexes, and these complexes sit on the patient's own platelets, and they are destroyed. Other hypotheses are patient may produce the platelets which somehow sit on their own platelets, which are removed by the spleen. Okay? So there are theories that nothing is clearly proved, but PTP is the disease, if you come across, it is a very, what you can say, salvageable thing. Once you diagnose it, and you can transfuse the platelet, give steroids, and it comes up. Next, please. Next, please. So that's what I said already. How does this anti-HPA? And the commonest antibody is human platelet against the human platelet antigen 1A. That is the anti-HPA 1A antibody, which is the cause of this PTP. Next, please. Next, we'll skip this. Next, please. A word about GVHD, which again was passing reference was made. Again, I won't go into detail, but we all know about BMT GVHD. We all know how to manage it, how to treat it, but we don't bother about transfusion-associated GVHD. Transfusion, any GVHD, as you know, should have 3 criteria. The recipient should be immunodeficient. The donor should be immunocompetent, those lymphocytes, and there should be HLA mismatch. That is the classical thing when GVHD will occur. Now, in transfusion-associated GVHD, the recipient is not at all immunocompromised. Then why should it occur? Okay? So that is the beauty. So, and that is the reason we always say we should not encourage directed donation. Right? You should never get blood from the first degree relatives. Right? And as we Indians, we are very, very emotional people. Whenever we don't donate blood, but whenever our father or mother is admitted, we rush to blood bank and we want to give our own blood to our father or mother, isn't it? That is the commonest thing which I have seen across cities, because luckily I do transfer, I do go to many, many places to give lectures, and this is the commonest thing I have observed. So why should you not do that? Next slide, please. Next. Next. This is the reason, if I can explain you, which I have included this slide for last 20 years in my each lecture. Suppose the father is a patient who has the HLA haplotype of A9B12DR2, and then actually there are 2 chromosomes on A19B34DR. These are hypothetical things. Mother may share, or his wife may share, one of the haplotypes. Okay? So one of the children will become homozygous for that haplotype, A9B12DR2 in this case. Okay? Now, when this child wants to give blood to his father, what will happen? Father's immune system says, "Ye to apne paas hai, this haplotype is already there." So they don't recognize it as a foreign haplotype. So they don't raise their immunological guards. They drop it actually. Okay? That this is our own thing. But you are transfusing blood, and you are transfusing along with it lymphocytes, immunocompetent lymphocytes. Even if you give filtered blood, even if you transfuse just 700 lymphocytes, still it will cause it. What does happen? Those immunocompetent lymphocytes will recognize that second haplotype, A19B35DR7, as foreign. And they launch a severe attack on the recipient, because you are not doing anything. So that attack results in what we call as graft versus host disease, which is a transfusion associated. And mind you, is absolutely serious. The mortality even today is close to 90 to 95%. You give that patient anything, many of the clinical hematologists are there, you give him steroids, IVIG, rituximab, plasma exchanges, they will die. And mind you, one of the first cases in this area, West Zone, was diagnosed in Surat by Dr. M.B. Agarwal, because I was associated in little workup in that case. In Surat, this case was diagnosed. That gentleman I know died That was some 25 years back. Until after that, we decided that we should include this in every talk. Even if you ask me to talk on immunohematology, still I will get this slide because it has to be. How can you prevent it? You can. Then you should have an irradiation facility. What does irradiation does, which Dr. Rajesh showed you the irradiator, it inactivates these lymphocytes, immunocompetent lymphocytes. So even if you transfuse them, they will not do anything. So if SURAT, if you are using irradiation facility, then only allow this sort of directed donation. Otherwise, please refuse straightforward. Next, please. Next, I won't go into detail. I'm just trying to cover the complications. Message should go across, that's my aim is today. Next, please. This we already talked how to irradiate and this thing. You should have an irradiator, okay? Once you have an irradiator, you can know this. Next, now mind you, if you irradiate the blood, it doesn't mean you are preventing the viral transmission, okay? Please don't go under that wrong impression that if I irradiate, blood saaf ho gaya. No, because if you want to remove the viruses also, by irradiation, we'll have to use a dose of 2500 gray. What dose we use now is 25 gray. So 100 times more. And if you use that dose, your entire blood unit will be hemolyzed. Okay? So you are not going to achieve that. So irradiation does not prevent aluminization. It does not prevent viral transmission. So it doesn't mean you are going to stop doing any other test. Right? It only prevents THGVLT. Next, please. Next. Now, last 5-6 minutes on hemolytic reaction. This is very important because they need to be diagnosed very fast. As you all know, there are acute and delayed transfusion reactions. Acute are easy to diagnose because patient is in terrible state. Delayed, unfortunately, are not diagnosed even today. Okay? So let's have a few words on that. Next, please. How do you diagnose acute reaction in a conscious patient? There is abrupt onset, nausea, vomiting, fever. Fever and chill is the first sign. So if you use antipyretic before every transfusion, you are going to mask even a potential hemolytic transfusion reaction. Never do that, please. Never. Let patient have fever, you may be saving him from hemolysis. And how will you diagnose it, which I always ask the anesthetist, if patient is under GA and hemolytic transfusion reaction occurs? Because urine becoming red is quite late, right? When the kidneys get damaged or hemolysis occurs so much that it occurs. So severe sudden hypotension and then hemoglobinuria. So sudden hypotension in a very good operating patient on the operating table, please think of hemolysis, some wrong blood given. Next, please. This you all know, the hemolysis occurs, the first thing to get fire are the kidneys. Next, please. Of course, DIC, thrombus formation, you all know it. Keep on giving it. The thing is, once the hemolytic transfusion reaction occurs, please mind you, diagnose it fast, stop the transfusion immediately, send the necessary sample to the blood bank along with the urine. Blood bank will do their work, okay? They will do the DCT, ICT. These are so important tests at that stage. And they will tell you this is, and the blood group and the wrong blood group, if it is there, you had it, okay? So please send the necessary sample. Next, please. How to manage, you know it. I am not going to go into detail. Next. These are the investigations that blood bank will do, but you should send the sample for this, right? This is very important because people don't send the sample and then the workup will not be done, okay? And then the diagnosis doesn't happen, patient doesn't get proper management. So these are very important things to be done. I will emphasize on DCT, it is a very important test in such scenarios. It's always important, Sanmukh Bhai knows it, but this is very important when clinically something occurs. Next, please. Hemolytic transfusion reaction doesn't occur only with the mismatched blood group, mind you. It can occur with the a very bacterially contaminated blood, excessive warming, because this I have again seen, blood is very cold, People put it in some warmer somewhere or hot water, take it out and transfuse it. Mind you, please don't do that. If you have a normal patient requiring transfusion, whatever blood you receive from the blood bank, please hang it and start the transfusion, even if it is cold. Because you have to support to transfuse in 4 hours. By the time it attains that room temperature, 37 degrees centigrade. Don't do that on the warmer. Use the warmer only if you want in cases of massive transfusion. As Rajesh referred, if there is a massive transfusion, required, there is a massive bleeding, patient is losing blood like anything, use warmer, give the blood. But not otherwise, please. Don't use any of your hot water tanks or water baths or whatever you have on the floor, blood, don't use them. Next, please. Next. This is what blood bank will do. Next, please. Delayed. Now, delayed hemolytic transfusion in your clinical practice, if you are a surgeon, if you see a patient coming to you after 7 days, 15 days, you have done a wonderful surgery, but still he shows a drop in hemoglobin. Okay? Your surgical site is fantastic, nothing. Please think of delayed hemolytic transfusion reaction, right? The only sign in the patient is a drop in hemoglobin. Okay? So worry about that. Just let the blood bank know because it is easy to manage. There is nothing much you need to do. Next, please. Next. Next. And last, a word about immunohemolytic anemia. I know Dr. Sanmukh Joshi will help you in everything. Let me tell you clinically what happens, how you should prevent this hemolytic transfusion reaction, right? Because the hemolytic transfusion reaction is disastrous, okay, if it occurs. But there are ways to prevent systematically. Next, please. Next, you all know what are anti-A, anti-B, unexpected antibody and those things. Next, please. What is important antibodies? Two which I want to talk about are the alloantibodies and autoantibodies, right? In clinical practice, I am sure you see plenty of alloantibodies, right? Because you must be seeing patients with pregnancies and those things. They have produced so many alloantibodies, right? Even in surgical practice, patient comes to you, you may be doing a knee transplant or knee replacement or anything. Patient blood group is normal, you do a compatible blood, you transfuse the blood, he comes for some second operation, everything is incompatible. Because during the first transfusion, someone must have given her not incompatible blood, compatible blood, but with an antibody. Okay? Next, please. Next. So what happens? There are some clinically significant antibody about which we bother, and these are the ones which everybody will agree, RH and KL antibodies. RH doesn't stop with the D. There are so many of them. Clinically, you have big C, big E, small e. Okay? These are all potentially hemolytic antibodies. Next, please. Next. So clinically significant because they can cause hemolytic transfusion reaction, they can cause hemolytic disease of the newborn, and they can cause the reduced survival of the red cells. Next, please. So what we do, and that is what I wanted to talk to you, whenever a patient is there, we not only do the good blood group of the patient, we do what we call as unexpected antibody screening. Okay? So once you do the unexpected antibody screening, we look for all the antibodies apart from ABO-RH, right? Apart from ABO. So all antibodies are detected. ABO are the cold antibodies, they are not, we can easily find out them in the blood group. Other antibodies are detected by this antibody screen, and this screen will tell you whether there are any significant antibodies or not. So doing an antibody screen is very, very important in any blood setup. Even one does the cross match, right? So those sort of things are very important. Next, please. Next. So if we find the antibodies, we need to react appropriately. What I'm trying to say, if your patient comes back with an alloantibody, suppose the alloantibody is against big C, then I had to give a blood which is big C antigen negative. Okay? That is very important. What is the other solution? Other solution is to give a total phenotype match blood. And I'm happy to say that in my blood center, we phenotype all our blood donors, right? So I know the phenotype of each and every donor who donates blood. I know his not only D antigen status and ABO status, but I know his big C, big E, small e status and KL status of that donor. So whenever there is a patient who comes with an antibody, I give him a phenotype match blood or antigen negative blood. All our thalassemia children, multi-transfuse patients in our setup are getting phenotype match blood. So many of my thalassemia children have not produced antibodies even after 400 to 500 transfusions, right? Because we are issuing them leukodepleted, NAT-tested phenotype match blood to every child. And they are doing very well. So that is what is a phenotype match blood should be. Next, please. Next, please. This is important because not for blood center, but the clinicians also. If you have a patient with small e antibodies, then you have a big problem in hand. Give blood centers some time to work because 98% of us will have small e antigen. So it's very difficult to get a compatible blood. So that's why this blood group antigen frequency should be known. Next, please. Next. So I have already talked about giving a RH-KEL compatible blood. I am sure with Lok SAMARPAN doing such a fantastic work, they would be able to issue this sort of phenotype match blood even to all patients. Next, please. In fact, clinicians should ask for it. That is the beauty of it. Next, please. Last, a clinical practice, you get the cases of AIHA, autoimmune hemolytic anemia, most challenging because you will never get any compatible blood. And then the problem comes what to do. In Mumbai, luckily, I have a little bit of experience because we have handled, this is quite common in children. I have handled plenty of such cases with Dr. M.R. Lokeshwar at that time, in 96, 97 onwards. And we have managed to give, because every AIHA case, there will be totally incompatible. All blood banks refuse them. So I gladly accepted those cases. And we managed to give them a very good blood in the sense, initially there was a concept of least incompatible blood, but that has gone. Now we give them RH-KEL phenotype match blood. And I will tell you simply why it is important to give such blood, because these cases of AIHA are due to extravascular destruction. The antibodies which are there are sitting on the red cell. They are incomplete antibodies, like anti-D, anti-C, anti-E. They are not complete antibodies. They don't cause intravascular destruction. Okay? So they are sitting on the red cell and they are removed by the spleen. And that takes time. That takes almost 24 hours. So you are given that window to act very fast. Okay? So any AIHA case, if you come across, you quickly start with steroids, IV steroids, and give him phenotype match blood. Nothing will happen, mind you. And this is how we have handled these cases. So all these incompatible so-called cases can be handled and should be handled, and they should not be left to die. Because AIHA cases, when they come to you, their hemoglobin will be around 2 gram, 3 gram, and 4 gram%. So that's the way to manage. Next, please. Next. So this is what I was talking about. Intravascular destruction, if you give a group person B group blood, almost 300, 400 will be lies in 2 hours. And that's why kidneys get fired. But if it's an extravascular, it is a very slow process. And that's how you should start with IV IgG comes later. You should start with steroid first and give the blood. Next, please. I think I will stop here because it's quite late. But word about NAT testing, because there is a very important complication of getting, you may do a transplant and the patient comes back to you with HCV infection, which is not an uncommon scenario. Bombay, one of the biggest hospitals, is sued for that, right? And the judge said that if the better techniques are available, why are not being used? What does NAT do? Whenever there's someone gets an infection, suppose he gets an infection today, ELISA will detect particularly Hep C infection after 2 months. So if he donates during those 2 months, the recipient is bound to get infection. What does NAT do? Nucleic acid testing. It detects the virus within first 2 to 3 days of infection. Right? So that window period of 2 months is brought down to 3 days. And it's very unlikely that someone will get infection through blood transfusion. So that is the beauty of NAT. And again, I'm happy to say that we started first in the entire West-South zone on 9th May 2009, the NAT testing of all the blood units. So I think that's all. Thank you very much, Gyagya sir. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, sir. So our take home is અમર અકબર એન્થનીમાં પેલા 3 આમ બ્લડ આપે છે ને એ રીતે આપણા સગા સંબંધીને સમજાવવાનું છે. That is the first big take home. I request Dr. Prafulbhai Chasatia to felicitate sir with a topic of his, a gift which would be close to his heart. I am sort of tempted to ask you a question. I'm asking the audience. Doesn't he look like our Minister Piyush Goyal? How many people feel so? Please raise your hand.
Thank you.
Okay. Sure. If you are so happy, you can gift me the Gita. Okay. That we have imported, sir. Thank you. I thought I was the only one. Now I'd like... sorry? Any questions?
Sorry.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Now this is the perspective of an immunohematologist who's been to 16 countries and at the same time he's discovered blood groups. So at the same time, he's discovered the fact that progenetically, phenotypically, કારણ કે હવે આ બધા ટિપિકલ બહુ લાગી ગયા. જીનેટિક, પ્રોટીપિક, ફિનોટીપિક, એપિટોપિક, એટલે છેલ્લે એક ટોપી પહેરાવાના ચાન્સો એટલા જ ઓછા થાય છે. But I agree with sir. So we know him first. Now I'd like Dr. Bharat Jivani to please come over. And I'd like him to felicitate our chairpersons. Dr. Hasmukh Bhai Suchitra, Dr. Asha Ben Bhatt, and Dr. Prafulbhai Chasatia, sir. In today's times, the cameraman is like an anesthetic. Photo પાડીને આમ નહીં કરે ને ત્યાં સુધી કોઈ હાલે જ નહીં. So I think a big round of applause for our team who's been clicking.
Sir, one of our colleagues is right now having trally, and Dr. Kiran Bhai and all the team are managing. It's about now 27th or 25th day of his illness. Is on ventilator. So we would like to know about the prognosis now because it's lengthening more and more.
Which one?
Trally.
Trally. Oh. Achha. Wait, trally. Okay. As sir, I mean, I don't need to add, but he is there to manage. But trally normally doesn't cause a problem, but Correct. If the superadded bacterial infection sets in and those complications occur, lungs are compromised, then it's very difficult. As they say, fatality rate of TRAL is 6%, which is very high. If it occurs and doesn't recover within, say, first 6 hours or 1 day, 24 hours is the normally patient recovers very fast. But if it goes beyond that, still on ventilator? Yes, Acinobacter. Oh. Sir,
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions for both of our guests? Sanmukh bhai, नीचे एक mic आपो ना. Rajesh bhai, otherwise.
Deshpande is that we observe usually when there in particular in sickle cell disease cases, after transfusion, if there is little incompatibility, then patient's hemoglobin goes down before transfusion. And that is called bystander hemolysis. Whether transfusion transmitted thrombocytopenia, could it be because of that? That even after transfusion reaction, after transfusion, and if there is any reaction, that the count goes below that.
okay. If I understand, sir, what you want to say is that when you transfuse the blood, the platelet count drops down, right? In sickle cell cases particularly.
Complement action. So it non-specifically.
Yes. So, but I mean, there are 2-3 reasons before we talk of immunology in these cases, because all sickle cell, right? Whenever, because they are transfused repeatedly, as you all know, and if they are transfused, any transfusion, as you know, will cause the little marrow suppression in chronically transfused patient. So platelets either get little hemodiluted because of chronic transfusion or infections. Many of the sickles have a little bit of underlying infections going on. Well, I am also from sickle belt of Vidarbha, as you know. So many of these patients have those chronic infections going on. Kabhi knee joint damage रहता है, and those are not recovered totally. So that little bit of subclinical bacteria may also causes platelet count to drop. That is what I have observed.
But not complement-mediated destruction.
Complement-mediated maybe the next stage then. Could be. But first I feel this sort of clinically they get sorted out. I feel so, sir. Sorry.
In emergency obstetric bleeding, if RH negative blood is not available in blood bank, so what is the options? Emergency obstetric bleeding, patient is bleeding like anything, and negative blood group, blood not available in blood bank. Is there any option?
Yeah, like I covered during the talk, that you can also transfuse RH positive blood.
Okay.
In that case, after taking a proper consent. See, what worst will happen is that that individual will develop a anti-D antibody. Okay. Now, this also does not happen in 100% of the cases, actually, depending upon the immunological status of that patient, right? But precious life will definitely be saved. So you can definitely transfuse, and this has to be a part of your transfusion policy, so that in the court of law also, you have enough evidence and backing to prove why you took that
Same blood
medication.
group positive can be given.
Yes.
Definitely.
As you rightly said, your patient, obstetric patient, does not have any immunological problems most of the time.
Yes, yes.
Okay? So they are otherwise healthy. And if you give, as he is saying, positive blood, the antibodies take time to develop. Sir, if she is bleeding like PTP, or sorry, PPH cases,
Okay.
then just pump in the blood, positive blood. It doesn't matter. Patient's life will be saved. Let the antibody problem, we will sort it out later on. That's why we have immunologists.
Okay. Second question to Lok Samarpan Blood Bank. When we send receipt, we want blood. Sir, you can give in which particular, what time you are going to give us back?
Sir, this question is little vague. I will tell you why. If you want a proper workup.
Yes, because patient is bleeding. Sometime blood bank may reply ke,
Okay, I will give an answer. No
Yes.
problem. If at all, there are only two situations in life. One is life and death situation, one is normal situation. So there are only two types of patient, whatever branch you may be. One is life and death, one is patient requiring transfusion routinely. Right? There are no other situation. If it is life and death, you know that patient is now bleeding and is going to die, maybe on table, casualty, road traffic accident and everything, then you should indicate that to the blood bank that I need a quick spin blood. What they will do, they will not do a cross match total. They will just pick up the same blood group bags and give it to you. Transfuse it. It will save the patient. That is called quick spin, right? But if your patient is not a life and death situation, all 99% are normal patients, okay? In that case, give them time. They do a complete Coombs compatible cross match. उसमें तो incubation ही 1 hour का है. So give them at least 3 hours if you want to get that blood properly tested. Because as I said, we do a blood group, we do antibody screening, and then we do a cross match. So let it be a complete workup that is beneficial to your patient. But if your patient is dying, tell them, give in writing that this we need quick spin blood. They'll give in 15 minutes, 10 minutes.
thank you, sir.
સર હું રિપ્લાય આપું. આપણે લોકસમર્પણની વાત કરું તો સર નોર્મલી કન્ડિશનમાં આપણે 45 to 50 મિનિટ્સમાં બ્લડ આપીએ છીએ અને જો ઇમરજન્સી સિચ્યુએશનમાં હોસ્પિટલમાંથી ડાયરેક્ટ બ્લડ પેન પર કોલ આવે અથવા ડૉક્ટરને કોલ મીન્સ મને અથવા ટેકનિકલ હેડ જોડે વાત કરી ઇમરજન્સીમાં તો વિથિન 15 મિનિટ્સમાં અમે બ્લડ ઇસ્યુ કરેલા છે વિથિન 15 મિનિટ્સ અને પ્લસ અમે 15 મિનિટ્સ ઇસ્યુ કર્યા પછી કુમ્સ ફેઝ અમારો ચાલુ જ હોય છે કન્ટિન્યુ ટેસ્ટિંગ. જો કુમ્સ ફેઝ ઇનકમ્પિટેબલ આવે તો ઇમિડિયેટલી અમે ડૉક્ટરને પર્ટિક્યુલર બેગ નંબર આપીને કહીએ છીએ કે આ બેગ સર ટ્રાન્સફ્યુઝન ના કરતા એ રિટર્ન મોકલાવજો. આટલું અમારી સાઈડથી અમે કરીએ છીએ. અને પ્લસ એસડીપીની વાત કરું તો એસડીપી બી મેક્સિમમ હું મેક્સિમમ 3 hours કહું છું, પણ જો ઇમરજન્સી સિચ્યુએશનમાં કોઈ બી ડૉક્ટરનો ફોન આવે તો મેક્સિમમ 2 કલાકમાં રેડી કરીને આપું છું. ઇમરજન્સી અમારા મીન્સ જેટલા ડોનરો છે રેગ્યુલર કે જે અલગ ડિફરન્ટ ગ્રુપના એ અમને સપોર્ટ કરે છે અને ઇમરજન્સીમાં અમને વિથિન 1 hourમાં પ્રોડક્ટ કલેક્શન કરીને 1.5 થી 2 કલાકમાં અમે એસડીપી સાહેબ આપીએ છીએ.
सावंत सर ने कहा है कि हमारा जो इंडिया का जो ब्लड डोनेशन का जो सिनेरियो है वो ग्रीम है, लेकिन हमारे पास ब्लड बैंक है सर जो गिनीज बुक ऑफ वर्ल्ड रिकॉर्ड में स्थापित है. तो हम आपको विश्वास दिलाते हैं कि सूरत विल बी क्रीम ऑफ ब्लड ट्रांसफ्यूजन इन द कंट्री.
Definitely.
We will educate all our members. We have got our hematologists and pathologists and best surgeons with us.
आई थिंक आप लोग ब्लड डोनेशन में तो काफ़ी अच्छा काम कर रहे हैं. अभी ब्लड ट्रांसफ्यूजन में भी उतना ही अच्छा, बल्कि उससे ज़्यादा अच्छा काम होना चाहिए. आई थिंक दैट इज़ व्हाट शुड बी द एम.
Any more questions? Okay, I just have this announcement ki the resort where we are sitting, Bansari, I think we should thank them. They've given us this entire resort and all the help free. So they definitely deserve a vote of appreciation for the same. And
હવે ડૉક્ટર વઘાસિયા સાહેબ, ધર્મેશભાઈને હું સ્ટેજ ઉપર બોલાવીશ. પ્રશાંતભાઈ નાયકનું આપણે સન્માન કરીશું. એકદમ શોર્ટ નોટિસમાં સાહેબ આપણી વચ્ચે ઉપસ્થિત થયા એમના બિઝી શિડ્યુલમાંથી સમય કાઢીને. અને જેમ આરઝેડ પટેલ સાહેબે કીધું કે ખોટી ફિલ્ડમાં આવી ગયેલા છે, એવું નથી સાહેબ. પેથોલોજી બી એમનું એટલું જ પ્રિય સબ્જેક્ટ છે અને સ્ટેજ મેનેજમેન્ટ અને ઇંગ્લિશ પણ એમનો એટલો જ પ્રિય સબ્જેક્ટ છે. થેન્ક યુ પ્રશાંતભાઈ, થેન્ક યુ.
સર હવે મારા સાયલન્ટ પાર્ટનર પેલી મિનિટ્સ બચાવીને મિનિટ વધારી દીધી જ, એટલે આઈ રિક્વેસ્ટ request him to kindly come over. મનસુખભાઈ, નારિયા અને જયસુખભાઈ, એ બંને, જયસુખભાઈ ઝાલાવડિયા અને મનસુખભાઈ આગળ. હવે ડૉક્ટર જીવરાજભાઈ આપશે આપણો વોટ ઓફ થેન્ક્સ, આફ્ટર વિચ વી કેન ઓલ લીવ. થેન્ક યુ વેરી મચ.
હવે કોઈ જાય એવી બીક લાગતી નથી. ઘરના વજ્યા થઈ મોજથી આભાર વિધિ કરવી છે. લોકસમર્પણ રક્તદાન કેન્દ્રના આજના 26 વર્ષના બ્લડ ટ્રાન્સફ્યુઝન કોન્ક્લેવ પ્રસંગે ઉપસ્થિત મુંબઈથી પધારેલ બેઉ ડૉક્ટર સાહેબ શ્રી આનંદભાઈ દેશપાંડે સાહેબ, ડૉક્ટર શ્રી રાજેશ સાવંત સાહેબ તથા વડોદરાથી પધારેલ ડૉક્ટર રમેશભાઈ પટેલ, વલસાડથી ડૉક્ટર ઇટાલિયા સાહેબ, આ પ્રસંગે હું આપનો અમારા આમંત્રણને માન આપીને પધારે એ બદલ ખૂબ ખૂબ આભાર માનું છું. હું આશા રાખું કે આપને આપની વિઝિટ આ ગમશે. આ કાર્યક્રમને ખૂબ સરસ રીતે એન્કરિંગ કરીને ડૉક્ટર પ્રશાંતભાઈ નાયકે ખૂબ સરસ, મતલબ એને દીપાવી ઉઠો, ખૂબ સરસ એને બહાર લાવ્યા. કારણ કે આ તમને બધાને સાચવવા થોડાક અઘરા તો છે તે, પણ સાહેબે ખૂબ સારી રીતે એન્કરિંગ કરીને આપણને રાજી કરી દીધા. થેન્ક યુ પ્રશાંતભાઈ. અમે પણ તમારા ખૂબ ખૂબ આભારી છીએ અને આવી સેવા ભવિષ્યમાં અમને જરૂર પડે તો આપતા રહેશો એવી આશા રાખું છું. આવલા પેલા ડાયરાવાળા એમ કે સોનાની સાંકળે બાંધીને ન આવે ને, એવા જે ભેગા થયા હાકીમ જેવા ડૉક્ટર મિત્રો, 300, 400, 500 ડૉક્ટર મિત્રોને ભેગા કરવા, એટલે અમને ખબર પડી કે કેટલું બધું અઘરું કાર્ય છે. પણ આપ સર્વે સંસ્થાના ઇતિહાસને જોઈને, 26 વર્ષની આ બધી સેવાઓને જોઈને આપ સૌ આવ્યા અને આ પ્રસંગને ખૂબ દીપાવ્યો, ખૂબ માણ્યો અને ખૂબ રસપ્રદ બનાવ્યો. એ બદલ આપ સૌ મિત્રોનો આભારી છું અને ઋણી છું. આમાં આખી ઇવેન્ટ કરવા પાછળનો હેતુ કોઈ નથી, ખાલી હેતુ એટલો જ છે કે આપણે બ્લડ બેન્કિંગનું કામ વધારવું છે. સાહેબ કે શું કામ વધારવું છે? અંદરથી ખંજોળ આવે, ઉભરા આવે, અને ઈશ્વરે જે આઈસી ફિટ કરી છે ને કે સેવા જેટલી વિસ્તરે એવી વિસ્તરાવી અને વધારે સારી થઈ શકે એવી કરવી, એવા ભાવ સાથે તમે જોયું હોય તો આખો પ્રસંગ તમે જોયો હોય છે. કોઈનું રિસેપ્શન હોય, સારા ઉદ્યોગપતિના ઘરે રિસેપ્શન હોય, એવી રીતે તમને એન્ટરટેન કર્યા અથવા એવી રીતે પ્રસંગ કરવાનો પ્રયત્ન કર્યો છે. તો આ ફક્ત હેતુ એવો જ હતો કે બ્લડ બેન્કિંગનું કામ વધે અને લોકોને વધારે આપણે લાભ આપી શકીએ. તમને આ અઠવાડિયે 10 દિવસમાં થકવાડી દીધા છે ફોન કરીને. આશીષભાઈ છે, સુભાષભાઈ છે, સવાણી સાહેબ છે, આ બધાએ ફોન કરીને તમને ખૂબ ડિસ્ટર્બ કર્યા છે. તમારો આભાર માનું છું અને સોરી કહું છું કે તમને ખૂબ ડિસ્ટર્બ કર્યા એમ. આ આખા પ્રોગ્રામને સફળ બનાવવામાં આ બંસરી રિસોર્ટનું ટોટલ સૌજન્ય બંસરી રિસોર્ટના પ્રવીણભાઈ અને વિપુલભાઈ તરફથી છે. ટોટલ સૌજન્ય, આ હોલ, માઇક, સાઉન્ડ, ફૂડ બધું જ એમના તરફથી સૌજન્ય છે. હું એવું આશા રાખું કે આપણે તાળીઓથી અમને વધાવીએ અને ખૂબ ખૂબ આભાર પ્રવીણભાઈ, વિપુલભાઈ, આપ જ્યાં છો ત્યાંથી આપણે ખૂબ અમે તમારા આભારી છીએ. અને ઘનશ્યામભાઈ સાહિત્યકાર, ઘનશ્યામભાઈ લાખાણી, એ પણ આ સંસ્થામાં ભાગીદાર છે બંસરીમાં. અને આ આખો જે એન્ટરટેનમેન્ટનો થોડોક પ્રયત્ન કર્યો છે, લાભ લેવા લોકો રોકાણા નથી પણ એન્ટરટેનમેન્ટ કરવાનો, સાહિત્ય સમજાવવાનો, શીખવવાનો પ્રયત્ન કર્યો છે. એ બદલ ઘનશ્યામભાઈનો પણ ખૂબ ખૂબ આભારી છું. આખા આયોજનનો હેતુ જે આ બ્લડ બેન્કિંગ ક્ષેત્રના ભીષ્મપિતા, આપણા રાષ્ટ્રનું રતન, જ્ઞાનની અર્થી પરથી યુનિવર્સિટી, આ યુનિવર્સિટી જેવા ડૉક્ટર જોશી સાહેબનો ખૂબ ખૂબ આભારી છું. સાહેબ, આપના કારણે આ બ્લડ બેંકને વિશ્વભરમાં પ્રસિદ્ધિ મળી છે અને આગળ પણ પડતી પરિસિદ્ધિ મળતી રહે. થેન્ક યુ સર, આભાર સર. અંતમાં વધારે કંઈ કહેવાનું નથી. આખા પ્રોગ્રામ કરવામાં 26 વર્ષ આપણે સંસ્થાને થયા, એમાં 23 વર્ષ સુધી જેણે આ સંસ્થાને સાચવી છે, જાળવી છે, આગળ વધારી છે, એવા અત્યારના પ્રમુખ હરિભાઈનો ખૂબ ખૂબ આભાર માનું છું કે તમારા કારણે આપણે આ કામ કરી શક્યા છે. 23 વર્ષ સુધી તમે સુકાને એક ધારું સંભાળ્યું છે ને પણ આવતા સમયમાં સંભાળીને સંસ્થાને આગળ વધારતા રહેશો. હરિભાઈ, ખૂબ ખૂબ આભાર. સંસ્થાના સૌ સભ્યો, ટ્રસ્ટી, નિષ્ઠાવાન સ્ટાફ, આ અમારો આ દીકરીઓ છે ને, દીકરીઓ 50-60 દીકરીઓ છે. આ દીકરીઓ અમારી દીકરી જેવી છે.
અને ખૂબ અમને સાથ સહકાર આપ્યો છે. આ દીકરીઓને કારણે અમારે એક ટેન્શન ટેકનિકલનો કોઈ પ્રોબ્લેમ જ નથી, કોઈ સાઈડ જોવાની જ નહીં. અમે તો સાહેબને હિરણભાઈને ધાનાણી સાહેબને કાનાણી સાહેબને એવું કહીએ કે તમે માગો એ ટેકનોલોજી આપી છે, તમે બેસ્ટ કામ કરો. તો આ દીકરીઓને કારણે બેસ્ટ કામ કરી શીખ્યા છીએ. રિસેપ્શન પર છે ને એ આઈનો છે, એ જે બોલે ને એવી ઇમ્પ્રેશન આપણી પડે. કેમ્પમાં જાઓને જેવું વર્તન થાય ને એવી ઇમ્પ્રેશન આપણી પડે. અમે ક્યાંય જવાનું નથી ને અમે કાંઈ એવું કરવાનું નથી, અમે પાછળ બેઠા બેઠા રથ હાંકતા હોય બરાબર. પરંતુ જે આઈનો છે ને આ બધા સ્ટાફ છે એ આપણી આબરૂ આપણી ઇજ્જત વધારી દે છે. એવા નિષ્ઠાવાન સ્ટાફને ખૂબ ખૂબ આભાર માનું છું. આગળ તમને અમે તમારી સાથે થઈ પણ તમે અમારી સાથે રહો એવી આશા અભ્યર્થના રાખું છું. 10-15 મિત્રો એવા છે કે જેમને ખૂબ સપોર્ટ આપ્યો. કાર્ડિયોલોજિસ્ટ હોય, હિમેટોલોજિસ્ટ હોય અને સવારમાં 10 વાગે ફોન કરીને 2 કલાક આવી જાય એટલે આપણે એમ થાય કે આને નમન કરવા જોઈએ, સલામ કરવી જોઈએ બરાબર. આવા 10 મિત્રો છે અને હું ખાલી નામથી એવો કરી હિરેનભાઈ ધારણાણી, હંસમુખભાઈ બલર, ધર્મેશભાઈ વગાસિયા, જગદીશભાઈ વગાસિયા, ભરતભાઈ જીવાણી, રીતેશભાઈ વેકરિયા, જયેશભાઈ સાંગાણી, રવિન્દ્રભાઈ કોરાટ, નિકુંજભાઈ વિઠલાણી, જગદીશભાઈ સખિયા, નિલેશભાઈ પુરુષોત્તમ, અમુલકભાઈ સવાણી, અશોકભાઈ પટેલ અને ભાવિનભાઈ બુવા. આ સિવાય તમે બીજા બધાએ ડાયરેક્ટ કે ઇનડાયરેક્ટ ખૂબ સપોર્ટ કર્યો છે. પણ આ મિત્રોને હું વંદન કરું છું સાહેબ. આવતા સમયમાં આપણે એક કમિટી બનાવીને તમારા સલાહ સૂચન પ્રમાણે ખૂબ સારું કામ કરવું છે અને એના માટે હું તમને આમંત્રણ પણ આપું છું. અંતમાં જેણે ડાયરેક્ટ ઇનડાયરેક્ટ જે સહકાર આપ્યો હોય એ બદલ બધાનો હું આભાર માનું છું. થેન્ક યુ, ધન્યવાદ, આભાર.